Chapter 1 The King. The story of the Mahabharata begins with a king named Shantanu. One day, the king was in the forest walking near the river Ganga when he saw a beautiful woman walk out of the water. The king was mesmerized and instantly fell deep in love with the mysterious woman. The king inquired as to the woman's identity. "Why do you want to know?" asked the woman. "I am the king of Hastinapur," said Shantanu, "and I have fallen madly in love with you and wish to marry you." "I will accept your proposal, dear king, but only if you accept my two conditions," said the mysterious woman. The king was entranced. "Name your conditions, dear lady, and I will gladly accept them." "The first condition is, never ask who I am or where I come from. The second condition, you may observe my actions, but you shall never intervene. The day you break any of these two conditions, I will leave you," said the woman. The king was stunned by these requests, but his mind was overtaken with desire, and he readily agreed. The king and the woman returned to the palace and were married. Chapter 2 The Queen. After some time, the queen gave birth to a son. The king was overjoyed at the news. He rushed to the chamber to greet the queen. However, he was confused when he saw her carry the baby towards the river. When the queen got to the river, she put the baby into the water and watched it wash away in the current. The king was horrified. He wanted to shout out, but he remembered his promise to the queen, to only observe but never intervene in any of her actions. He was dumbfounded. The queen returned to the palace, and life went on. Some time later, the queen gave birth to a second son. The king had forgotten the tragedy of the first son, and was again overjoyed at the birth of his new son. But again, as he went to her chambers, he saw the queen carry the child towards the river, set it down in the water, and let it wash away. Again the king was horrified and heartbroken, but again he could say or do nothing due to his promise. This continued for a further 5 times over the years. Each time a son was born, the queen carried the child to the river and let the baby be washed away by the current. Finally, an 8th son was born. Once again, the queen carried the son towards the river, but this time the king could stand it no longer. "Stop!" he shouted. "Stop! I won't let you do this again." The queen stopped and looked at the king. "But you promised." The king looked at her in anguish. "I don't care. I can't take it anymore. I have watched 7 of my sons die. I will not let you kill this child." The queen smiled and said, "Very well, dear king. As per our agreement, I must now leave you. However, before I do, I will reveal to you my secret. I am Ganga, the river goddess. The 8 children born to you are 8 angels of heaven. They once offended a great sage. In retaliation, the sage cursed them to be born as human and suffer the pain and miseries of a human life. 7 of the angels repented and begged for mercy. Taking pity on them, the sage reduced his curse so that their lives as humans will be short-lived. The 8th angel, however, stood defiant, and as such, he was cursed to live a long and painful life in this mortal world. This is that 8th angel. I will take him with me to the heavens and train him so that he develops the skills and temperament to bear the burdens of the life ahead of him. I will return him to you when his training is complete." Ganga then vanished with the child. The king stood for a long while at the river in shock, and then returned to the palace, deeply saddened. Chapter 3 The 8th Son. Some years after the queen and his son left, Shantanu was walking along the river Ganga. He would often return to the river to reminisce about his lost queen and son, and think about the tragedy of his 7 sons that were drowned in the river. He had lived the previous years filled with great sadness. This time, he saw a boy playing with a bow and arrow near the river. Something about the teenager made him curious and drew him closer. As he approached the boy, goddess Ganga emerged from the river. "Greetings, dear king. As per my promise, the time has come to return your son to you. He has completed his training. Over the years, I have taken him to many different realms and great teachers. He has learned the duties of kings and political science. He has been taught ancient religious scriptures, as well as mental and spiritual sciences. He has knowledge of the duties of priests, and has been trained in advanced warfare. He has also been gifted with celestial weapons from the king of the gods. I have named him Devavata." Ganga then looked at the boy. "Go to your father, my son, and bring him joy." Ganga then disappeared, her duties completed. Shantanu was overjoyed to have his son and heir back. Over the years, his son proved his wisdom and valor many times. He single-handedly defeated an invading army and was loved by all in the kingdom. Shantanu was immensely proud of his son, but he still missed Ganga and suffered from a lonely heart. Chapter 4. Bhishma. One day, King Shantanu saw a beautiful woman on the river Ganga. He was lonely for many years, and he longed for a companion. The woman, Satyavati, was the daughter of a fisherman king. Shantanu asked the king for her hand in marriage. The fisherman king was a shrewd negotiator. "I will allow the marriage, dear king, but only if my daughter's sons become the next in line for the throne." Shantanu was shocked at the request. "But Devavata is the crown prince of Hastinapur. I will not change this," replied Shantanu. "Then, unfortunately, I cannot allow the marriage," said the fisherman king. Shantanu had blindly accepted conditions for marriage previously, and it had cost him his 7 sons. This time he would not be so reckless in matters of the heart. He refused the request and returned to his palace deeply saddened. Devavata noticed his father's sadness and inquired with the council as to the reason. When he found out about the woman his father had met, he went to the fisherman king to speak to him directly. "My father is in love with your daughter. Please allow the marriage," said Devavata. "As long as you are the crown prince, then my daughter's sons will have no chance at the throne," said the fisherman king. "Then I will give up my right as crown prince," said Devavata. "There is nothing I will not do to bring joy to my father." "But in the future, your sons will also have a claim to the throne," said the fisherman king, "and this will cause problems for my grandchildren." Devavata then took a solemn vow. "In that case, in addition to giving up my right to the throne, I will also promise to never marry and to remain celibate for all of my life." In response to Devavata's words, the heavens opened up and showered flowers upon him. He was given the name Bhishma, the one who took a terrible vow. With the consent of the fisherman king, Bhishma took Satyavati to his father on a chariot and informed his father about his promise. Shantanu was devastated upon hearing about the severity of his son's vow. Shantanu was granted the power to give his son a special gift in return for his action. Bhishma was granted the ability to choose the time and place of his death, effectively making him almost immortal. Shantanu and Satyavati soon married, and 2 sons were born. Chapter 5. The 3 Princesses. When King Shantanu passed on, as per their agreement, the sons he had with Satyavati became the next in line to the throne. Their firstborn son was appointed the new king of Hastinapur. However, the new king died in battle before he produced any heirs. Their second son was then appointed king. However, he was still a child, so Bhishma acted as his regent. When the king came of age, Satyavati and Bhishma decided to get him married, so that he could produce heirs. The king of Kashi was having a groom-choosing contest for his daughters. He had invited all the eligible kings and princes. However, due to a past dispute, the king of Hastinapur was not invited. Bhishma was insulted by the omission. and with the permission of Satyavati, went to Kashi to win the princesses for his brother. Bhishma gathered the 3 princesses into his chariot and challenged the suitors to win them back. The kings and princes gave chase, and a fierce battle ensued, but they were no match for Bhishma. He fended off their attacks easily. One suitor, however, King Shalva, remained in chase for the longest and fought the hardest, trying desperately to win back the princesses. Bhishma destroyed his carriage, leaving him humiliated, but spared his life. The 3 princesses, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika, were brought to Hastinapur and offered to the king for marriage. The eldest princess, Amba, appealed to Satyavati. She was in love with Shalva, the king who pursued Bhishma the longest. On Satyavati's request, Bhishma allowed her to return to Shalva. However, in the years to come, Amba would play a pivotal part in the life of Bhishma. The 2 remaining princesses, Ambika and Ambalika, were married to the king. Sadly, the young king died of an illness before he could produce any heirs. Satyavati was troubled. The kingdom was left without any lineage. She appealed to Bhishma to take up the throne and to take his brother's wives as his own. "Mother," he replied, "you above all others know of my vow to never take the crown and to remain celibate all my life. I will not break this oath." Satyavati then thought of another solution to the problem they faced. She decided to reveal a secret that she had carried for many years. Chapter 6. Vyasa. Before her marriage to Shantanu, Satyavati met a sage named Parasha. Their union created a son who they called Vyasa. Like his father, Vyasa was a great sage who had omniscient and spiritual powers. The kingdom needed an heir, and since Bhishma was bound by his oath to never take the crown and to remain celibate, Satyavati summoned Vyasa to help with their predicament. Vyasa had promised his mother that he would always be on hand to assist with any problems she may have. Satyavati explained the situation with the death of her son before he could produce heirs for these 2 queens. As the half-brother of the king, under the current circumstances, Vyasa had the right to produce an heir to the kingdom with the queens. He agreed to perform the duties as required. Ambika was sent to Vyasa's chambers, but Vyasa appeared to her as an extremely hideous man. Ambika closed her eyes in horror all through the blessing ceremony. Afterward, Vyasa said to his mother, Ambika would produce an heir that was healthy and powerful, but he would be blind from birth. Then, the second queen, Ambalika, was sent to Vyasa's chambers. When Ambalika saw Vyasa, she turned pale white in terror. After the process was complete, Vyasa informed his mother, Ambika will have a valiant son, but he will be pale white in appearance. Unsatisfied with the situation, Satyavati instructed Ambika to return to Vyasa's chambers to get blessed again. She was determined that they should be a normal, complete child with no handicaps. However, Ambika would not subject herself to Vyasa again. She dressed her handmaiden in her clothes and sent the handmaiden to Vyasa in her place. Unlike the 2 queens, the handmaiden performed her duties without fear and with detachment. After the blessing ceremony, Vyasa said to her, "You will produce a son who will be wise, artful, diplomatic, and a man of great learning. He will free you of your life as a handmaiden." Vyasa, his duties completed, then disappeared. The first son born to Ambika was named Dhritarashtra, and he was blind. The second son, born to Ambalika, was named Pandu, as he was pale white in color. The third, flawless son, born to the handmaiden, was named Vidura. When the boys came of age, Pandu was appointed as king, although he was the second son. Dhritarashtra was not thought capable since he was blind. Vidura was appointed prime minister. Dhritarashtra was arranged to marry the princess Gandhari of Gandhar. When Gandhari learned her husband-to-be was blind, she chose to wear a blindfold from that day forth, so that she experienced the world as her husband did. Pandu was married to Princess Kunti of the Yadava dynasty. However, Bhishma motivated for Pandu to take a second wife from the Madra kingdom. This would further strengthen the empire. So, Pandu took Princess Madri as his second wife. Kunti, like the queens before her, had a secret. One that in the years to come would shake the kingdom of Hastinapur to its very core. Chapter 7. Kunti. When Kunti was a young girl, her household was visited by a great sage. Kunti cared for the sage and tended to his every need. The sage was so impressed by her that before he left, he gifted her with a mystical mantra. When recited, this mantra would allow her to summon any celestial deity to bless her with a child. Kunti was curious to know if the mantra worked, and with childish abandon used the mantra to summon the sun god, Surya. As the sage promised, Surya appeared and gifted her with a child. The child glowed in the sun and had a golden chainmail across his chest. After the wonderment had subsided, Kunti found herself terrified. She was an unmarried young girl. She had no idea how to take care of a child, and frightened about what the elders may say. In a panic, Kunti placed the baby in a basket and sent it floating down the river Ganga, praying for a kind soul to find the baby and raise it as their own. Now, Kunti was the queen of Hastinapur, along with Madri, the king's second wife. When King Pandu returned from his mission of conquest, he took his two queens on a trip into the forest, leaving Dhritarashtra as the king in charge. One day, when Pandu was hunting in the forest, he shot his arrow into the bushes where he thought he spotted a deer. Unfortunately, his arrow hit a mystical rishi who was with his wife. With his dying breath, the rishi cursed Pandu that the moment he touched his wives with desire, he would instantly fall to his death. Pandu was devastated. He had not yet produced any heirs. He decided to remain in the forest and sent word that Dhritarashtra's duties as king would be extended. Pandu discussed their situation with Kunti, and she revealed to him the mantra that the guru had bequeathed her. Pandu was excited to hear this news and urged her to make use of the mantra to create their heirs. "Which deity should I invoke first, my lord?" asked Kunti. "Invoke Dharma, the god of justice," replied Pandu. "This will ensure that our oldest son will be blessed with righteousness." Kunti chanted the mantra, and Lord Dharma appeared and gifted her with a son. They named him Yudhishthira. Pandu wanted more children and asked her to invoke Vayu, the lord of the wind, so their second son would be mighty and powerful. After Kunti's mantra, Vayu gifted her with a son who they called Bhima. Pandu was ecstatic. For his third son, he wanted a child that would be the most glorious and potent among men. For this child, Kunti invoked Lord Indra, the king of the heavens, and Arjuna was born. Pandu then asked Kunti to teach the mantra to Madri so that she may also have children. Kunti agreed. Upon learning the mantra, Madri invoked the Ashvins, the twin deities. The twins gifted to her were named Nakula and Sahadeva. And the 5 children came to be known as the Pandavas. Meanwhile in Hastinapur, Gandhari learned of the children born to Kunti and Madri, and she desperately desired children of her own. Chapter 8. Gandhari. When Gandhari heard of the children that were born to Kunti and Madri, she desperately desired to have children of her own. It had been many years, but she had not fallen pregnant. As if in answer to her prayers, Vyasa appeared in Hastinapur, desiring food and shelter. Gandhari cared for him herself, tending to his every need. Vyasa was impressed by her devotion and asked her to name her reward. "I desire 100 strong sons," Gandhari declared. "And so, you shall have it," replied Vyasa, and then disappeared Gandhari fell pregnant shortly thereafter, but after 2 years of maternity, she had still not given birth. One day in frustration, she hit her stomach with a stick and immediately went into labor. Her handmaidens were horrified at the result. Gandhari had delivered a solid mass of flesh, like an iron ball, not a child. Heartbroken, Gandhari instructed them to get rid of it. Just then, Vyasa appeared. "Stop," he commanded. "I will prepare what needs to be done." Vyasa prepared 100 vats and broke up the mass of flesh into each of the jars. As he did this, Gandhari desired a daughter as well. Reading her mind, Vyasa informed her that the last bit of flesh would produce her daughter. Sometime later, the first son emerged from the vat and wailed as his lungs filled with air. Outside Hastinapur, the wild animals all brayed in response. Violent winds and fierce fires broke out around the kingdom. This son was named Duryodhana. Shortly after him, his 99 other brothers emerged from their vats, and lastly, their sister, who was named Dushala. These children would come to be known as the Kauravas. Dhritarashtra was grateful to have heirs of his own, but Yudhishthira, the son of King Pandu, would be next in line to the throne, and not his son Duryodhana. Dhritarashtra's jealousy and resentment would fuel a rivalry that would lead to a shattering collision between the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu, and the Kauravas in the years to come. Chapter 9. Return to Hastinapur. Pandu spent his time in the forest with his 2 wives, Kunti and Madri, as well as his 5 sons, in relative happiness. One day, however, he forgot the curse of the rishi, and, overcome with desire, he touched the arm of his wife Madri. The rishi's curse took effect, and Pandu instantly fell to his death. Madri, overcome with grief, took her own life in return. This left Kunti as the sole parent of the 5 Pandava brothers. Kunti decided to return the family to the palace of Hastinapur. They were welcomed back, but not all the family were happy to see them. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas, was the crown prince, but Dhritarashtra desired this position for his eldest son, Duryodhana. Queen Gandhari's brother Shakuni sowed even more seeds of distrust between the Kauravas, the sons of Dhritarashtra, and the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu. Nevertheless, the families achieved a relative harmony, and Bhishma set about training the princes in their royal duties and skills. A rivalry quickly heated up between Duryodhana and Bhim. Bhim was immensely strong and made a habit of wrestling the Kaurava brothers into submission, often humiliating them in the process. Arjuna, meanwhile, excelled in every field of warfare training. One day, the princes were playing in the field when their ball ended up at the bottom of a well. When Yudhishthira reached into the well, his ring slipped off and also fell in. An archer walking past saw the princes trying to retrieve the items. He collected some reeds from the area and shot the first reed into the ball. He then shot the following reeds into the end of the previous one, eventually forming a long chain which reached the top of the well. He then pulled out the ball. Then he removed an arrow from his quiver, spoke a mantra, and shot the arrow into the well. The arrow returned with the young prince's ring. The princes were overjoyed and urged the archer to return with them to the palace, so that they could introduce him to their granduncle Bhishma. The archer agreed, and behind his eyes there was a look of sadness, as well as a desire for revenge. Chapter 10. Drona. When Bhishma heard of the prince's encounter with a mysterious archer in the woods, he instantly knew that this must be the legendary archer Drona. Drona had been returning from a humiliating meeting with King Draupadi when he had his chance encounter with the Kuru princes. When Drona was a young student, he was friends with Draupadi. He had assisted Draupadi on many occasions, and one day Draupadi promised him that when he became king, he would share his kingdom with Drona. In the years since, Drona had fallen on hard times. He had a wife and a young child, and despite his great skill, he often battled to provide for them. Drona went to Panchala and met with King Draupadi. He reminded Draupadi of his childhood promise. King Draupadi laughed him off. Kings can never be friends with poor wretches. One who is not a king can never have a king for a friend. Draupadi and his court laughed Drona out of the palace. Drona was embarrassed, bitter, and infuriated. On his way home, he came across the princes, trying to get the ball out of the well. After demonstrating his archery skills, the princes eagerly introduced him to Bhishma. Bhishma appointed Drona as the guru for the princes. Drona eagerly accepted the position, and his financial woes had finally come to an end. Drona set about with earnest to train the princes in the art of weapons. Bhim and Duryodhana quickly showed skill at wielding the mace. Yudhishthir was an expert at using the spear. Nakula and Sahadev showed great skill with the sword. But Arjuna quickly became Drona's favorite student. One day, Drona set up a wooden bird in a tree and instructed the princes of their task to hit the eye of the bird. Before letting them fire, Drona asked each of the princes what they saw. "I see the bird, the branch, and the tree," said Yudhishthir. "No good," said Drona, and asked him to stand aside. The other princes had similar answers, until he came to Arjuna. "Tell me what you see," Drona asked Arjuna. "I see only the eye," replied Arjuna, and shot the arrow, which hit the eye of the wooden bird, dead on target. When the princes reached a certain level of skill, Drona asked for his Guru Dakshina, the payment given to the Guru by the student. "What is it you desire, master?" asked Arjuna. "Bring me King Draupadi," replied Drona. The princes set off on their mission, and with their special abilities and the training of Drona, Draupadi's guard proved no match for them. They had Draupadi at Drona's feet by the next day. "A king, you had said, Draupadi, can only have another king as a friend. I desired your friendship, so I strove for a kingdom and made it mine," said Drona. "But now you are no longer king, so I shall give you back half your kingdom. Now, King Draupadi, we can remain friends if you wish." Draupadi agreed to the conditions with a forced smile on his face. But he would remember this humiliation, and one day Drona and Draupadi would find themselves on opposite sides of a great war. Chapter 11. Deadly Rivals. When Kunti returned to Hastinapur with the 5 Pandava brothers, not everyone was happy to see them. With the passing of King Pandu, the duties of king remained with Dhritarashtra until Yudhishthir, the eldest son of Pandu, came of age. This created tension between the two sets of cousins, the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu, and the Kauravas, the sons of Dhritarashtra. The Pandava children were far ahead of the Kauravas in intelligence, learning ability, and physical strength. Duryodhana, the eldest of the Kaurava brothers, quickly realized that Bhim especially posed a great physical threat to him and his brothers. Bhim often wrestled the Kaurava brothers into submission, embarrassing them in all competitions of strength. Duryodhana grew a deep hatred for the mighty Pandava brother. One day, Duryodhana proposed a trip to the river Ganga for all the cousins. Everyone had a grand day. When the opportunity presented itself, Duryodhana poisoned Bhim's food. Bhim had a ravenous appetite and gobbled up all of his meals. At the end of the day, the cousins returned to the palace. Bhim, however, passed into a coma near the river. Unseen by the others, the eldest Kaurava bound Bhim's hands and feet and rolled him into the river, leaving him to drown. He then returned to the palace. When Yudhishthir noticed Bhim missing, he asked the others where his brother might be. No one had any answers. Meanwhile, Bhim sank deep into the river. The Nagas, the serpent creatures, surrounded him and bit him repeatedly. In a twist of fate, their venom counteracted the poison from the food, and Bhim awoke. He easily broke his bindings, and then grabbed the Nagas and smashed them against the riverbed. The Nagas, terrified, swam to Vasuki, the king of the Naga world. When the Naga king realized that this mighty young man was the son of Vayu, the wind god, he invited Bhim into the Naga palace. To help Bhim recover from his ordeal, the king presented him with pots of a potion called Rasakunda, which is known to increase strength. After swallowing 8 vessels full of the nectar, Bhim went off to sleep. The king then returned the young Pandava to the surface. When Bhim returned to the palace, much to Duryodhan's surprise, he related his fabulous tale to his mother and brothers. Yudhishthir suspected Duryodhan of foul play, but they had no evidence. The Pandava brothers realized that they would need to be much more cautious with their deadly cousin in the future. Chapter 12. Son of the Sun. When Drona's training with the young princes was complete, Bhishma arranged a contest to display the prince's great skill to the nation. In the first competition, Duryodhan and Bhim faced off to display their fighting skills with a mace. The fight soon escalated, to the point that it appeared it would be a battle to the death between the two princes. Ashvatthama, the son of Drona, had to intervene to break up the match. Eventually, Drona's star pupil, Arjuna, took the stage. Arjuna fired arrows into the ground and created fire. Then he fired arrows into the sky, and water rained down to put out the fire. In a display of mystical skill, Arjuna used the arrows to turn invisible. The stadium crowd roared with delight at the skill the young prince displayed. Drona called to the crowd, "Behold, the greatest archer of our time. There is none who could match his skill." Just then, a mysterious figure entered the stadium. "Guru Drona, Arjuna is not the greatest archer. I am." The crowd went silent, all trying to catch a glimpse of the boastful young man. In a matter of minutes, the young man showed off a dazzling display of archery skill, equaling that of Arjuna. "Who are you, young man?" asked Drona. "I am Karna, and I challenge your star pupil in a contest to the death." Arjuna was taken aback. "In order to challenge a prince, you must be of royalty. What kingdom do you hold?" asked Drona. Karna stayed silent. In the audience watching, Duryodhan was impressed by the young man. "Guru Drona, I hereby crown Karna as the king of Anga with immediate effect. This should fulfill any rules or regulations that may be required, and the contest between Arjuna and Karna can go ahead." A charioteer in the audience burst out into tears. "My son, I am so proud of you. You now have a kingdom." When Bhishma witnessed this, he inquired as to Karna's lineage. "Who are your parents, young man?" asked Bhishma. "Great Bhishma, I, Adhiratha, am the adopted father of Karna," said the old man. "The son of a charioteer cannot challenge a royal prince. Who are your real parents?" asked Bhishma. The young man's face grimaced in anger. He had no idea who his true parents were, and as such, he had no rights to challenge a prince of Hastinapur. The contest was called off, but Duryodhan realized he had a powerful ally in the skilled young man, one who was potentially even greater than the most skilled of the Pandavas, Arjuna. However, one person instantly realized the true identity of this young man. Tears streamed down Kunti's face as she realized her firstborn son, the one she secretly floated down the river when she was a young girl. The son gifted to her by Surya, the sun god. Chapter 13. House of Fire. As the years progressed, Yudhishthir's popularity among the people of Hastinapur grew. He was known for his wisdom, righteousness, and good conduct. The people wanted him as their new king as soon as possible. Under pressure from his council, King Dhritarashtra formally appointed Yudhishthira as the crown prince. This angered Duryodhana. He desired the crown for himself. His father, Dhritarashtra, was the eldest of the Kuru dynasty. But because Dhritarashtra was born blind, he was considered unable to fulfill the duties of a king. So instead, the second eldest, Pandu, the father of the Pandavas, was crowned king. When Pandu went into exile, Dhritarashtra fulfilled the duties of king, and later, when Pandu died of a curse, Dhritarashtra's reign as king was extended. Now that Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, was coming of age, Dhritarashtra's time as king was coming to an end. But Duryodhana believed that the crown should rightfully pass to him. He was the eldest son of Dhritarashtra. His father was robbed of the crown because of his disability, and yet he had still fulfilled the duties of king for all of these years. Duryodhana came up with a plan to rid himself of the entire Pandava family. There was an upcoming 5-day festival in Vanavat, one of the kingdoms of Hastinapur. Duryodhana went to his father, the king. "Father, since Yudhishthira is the crown prince, he should represent the royal family at the festival. In fact, it would be good if the entire Pandava family went along. There are wonderful sights and sounds at Vanavat, and they would have a magnificent holiday there." Dhritarashtra suspected the ill intentions of Duryodhana, but he agreed to the proposal. Secretly, he desired for his own son to be the next king, and not Yudhishthira. Dhritarashtra appointed the Pandava family to be the royal representatives at Vanavat for the festival. Yudhishthira was suspicious, but agreed to fulfill the duties required of him. Meanwhile, Duryodhana had commissioned a grand mansion to be built for the Pandava family in Vanavat. But the construction crew were instructed to build the mansion from lac, an extremely inflammable substance. One of the builders involved, loyal to Vidura, the Prime Minister, sent word back of the villainous procedures involved in the construction. Vidura warned Yudhishthira ahead of their trip to Vanavat to be extremely cautious. When the Pandava brothers and Kunti arrived in Vanavat, they settled into the mansion. 4 days went by with no incident, and they had an enjoyable time at the festival. On the 5th night, the mansion burst into flames, and the inhabitants of Vanavat watched in horror as they observed a raging inferno which no human could survive. Chapter 14. Deadly Sanctuary. During the time the Pandavas and Kunti spent in Vanavat, they were on high alert for any foul schemes of Duryodhana. When they arrived at the mansion constructed for them, Yudhishthira could smell the scent of lac, a highly inflammable substance. Thankfully, their uncle Vidura had warned them ahead of time. Although Duryodhana had commissioned the construction of the mansion, some of the builders involved were loyal to Vidura. Vidura had them secretly construct an escape tunnel under the mansion. At night, the Pandavas and Kunti slept in the basement of the mansion. On the final night, Yudhishthira arranged a ceremonial dinner at the mansion. The key accomplices of Duryodhana were also invited. At the end of the function, the Brahmins were sent home, but the accomplices were kept entertained. The Pandavas and Kunti went down to the tunnels, and Bhima set the house on fire as they escaped through the tunnels. Vidura had arranged a transport to take them across the river and into the forest. They dared not return to Hastinapur. Duryodhana had spies and assassins available everywhere. The family had to go into hiding and plan their next move. When news of the disaster reached Hastinapur, the kingdom was heartbroken. Duryodhana, feigning sadness, went to Vanavat to verify the deaths himself. What was left of the bodies in the mansion was burnt beyond recognition, and Duryodhana took them as the confirmation of the end of the Pandavas and Kunti. Meanwhile, the family escaped deep into the forest. At one point, Bhima carried his mother and all of his brothers. They were exhausted from sleep and food deprivation. The family eventually fell asleep under a banyan tree, while Bhima set off in search of water. When he returned with the water, he found his family still fast asleep. So he sat down on a rock and watched over them. Nearby, an evil demon of the forest, smelt humans. He longed for the taste of human flesh, and he sent his demon sister off to investigate. However, when the demoness, Hidimba, found the humans, she was immediately overcome with desire when she saw Bhim. She fell in love with the large, mighty Pandava brother. Assuming the form of a beautiful woman, Hidimba approached Bhim. "My dear, this forest is not safe for you and your family. My brother Hidimb is the ruling demon of this forest. He loves human flesh best of all, and he sent me to find you for his meal tonight. But I have fallen in love with you, and I will help you and your family to escape." Before Bhim could respond, a thunderous voice emanated from the forest. "You treacherous wench! Now you will die along with this human family, and I will have a grand meal of human and demon flesh tonight." Hidimb, Hidimba's brother, had arrived. Chapter 15. Demon Slayer. When Hidimb saw his sister Hidimba professing her love to Bhim, it threw him into a rage. "You will die for betraying me." Hidimb grabbed his sister by the arm. This angered Bhim. "Get your hands off her, demon. Fight me instead." Bhim threw Hidimb through the air. Hidimb was taken aback by the power of the young man. But Bhim was no ordinary human. He was gifted to Kunti by the wind god Vayu, and as such had immense strength since birth. And this strength was enhanced even further when he was a boy, by the Naga king Vasuki, who gave him 8 vats of the magical potion Rasakunda. Hidimb rushed Bhim, attacking him with all his beastly strength. The thunder of their encounter shook the forest and uprooted great trees. The commotion woke the rest of the Pandava family from their deep slumber. Bhim's brothers readied themselves for battle, but they quickly realized there was no need. Hidimb was no match for Bhim. After a few minutes of battle, Bhim eventually lifted Hidimb above his head, spun him around and around, and finally smashed him into the ground. With a few gurgling sounds, the demon that had terrorized the inhabitants of the forest for decades was dead. Kunti noticed the beautiful woman next to them. "Who are you, young lady?" asked Kunti. "Mother, my name is Hidimba. Your son has killed my brother Hidimb. Hidimb sent me to find you for his meal tonight, but I have fallen in love with your son, and I warned him of my brother's intentions instead. With your blessing, I wish to marry your son." Kunti noticed that Bhim seemed pleased with the proposal. "Very well, daughter. If my son Bhim agrees, I provide you with my blessings, but on one condition. During the night, we require our son's great strength to protect us, but in the morning and until sunset, he may spend his time with you." Bhim had a second condition for the marriage to go ahead. "I will spend my days with you, but only until you are blessed with a child. Then I will return to my family." Hidimba agreed to the conditions, and Bhim and her commenced their matrimonial life. In the morning, Bhim left with Hidimba. In the evenings, he returned to protect his mother and brothers during the night. After some time, Hidimba gave birth to a baby boy. But this was no ordinary child. Chapter 16. Demon Son. When Hidimba gave birth, due to both her and Bhim's mystical nature, the child immediately grew to adult form. He was named Gatagacha due to his bald head. The child was immensely powerful. He possessed all of his father's great strength, as well as his mother's mystical powers. The Pandava brothers all set about training the child. Gatagacha grew skilled in all weapons of war. His eventual weapon of preference was, like his father's, the mace. During the night, his demon powers grew even more powerful. Eventually, Gatagacha's training was completed. It was time for the Pandavas to move on. They were still wary of evading Duryodhana's spies and assassins, and should not have stayed in one place for as long as they did. Kunti asked Gatagacha to remain with and watch over his mother Hidimba. Gatagacha agreed, but made a pledge that if ever his father or the rest of the Pandava family required him, he would be there in an instant to help. The family thanked him and went on their way. Along their journey, they met sage Vyasa, the grandfather of the Pandavas, who guided them to the town of Ekachakra. In the village, they disguised themselves as the class of priests, the Brahmins, and stayed with the Brahmin family. During their time there, Bhim helped the village by slaying yet another demon, Bakasura. One day, a visiting Brahmin brought fantastic news of happenings in the kingdom of Panchala. King Draupadi had long nursed a desire for revenge against Drona, the royal arms teacher of the Kurus. He performed a great sacrificial prayer to create a son who will be able to kill the great warrior Drona. His wish was granted. Out of the flames of the sacred fire stepped a powerful young man. He was named Drishtadyumna, the courageous and splendid one. But then, a second figure emerged from the flames, a young woman whose beauty was unmatched. Chapter 17. Daughter of Fire. When the Pandavas heard the story of the spectacular birth of King Draupadi's daughter, they were greatly intrigued. Draupadi had scheduled a Swayamvara, a groom-choosing ceremony, for his daughter. Many of the Brahmins of Ekachakra were going to the kingdom of Panchala to attend the festival event. The Pandavas and Kunti joined in the trip. It would be good to see the spectacular kingdom of Panchala again. When they got to Panchala, after some sightseeing, Kunti stayed at the rented home, while the Pandava brothers attended the Swayamvara, like many hundreds of others from far and wide. At the stadium, the people were divided according to their caste, the division of roles in society. The Pandavas were disguised as Brahmins, the class of priests, so they sat with the other priests. The Kshatriya, the class of warriors and leaders, such as kings and princes, all sat on the opposite side of the stadium. Among these kings and princes sat the enemies of the Pandavas, Drona and Kana of the Kuru Empire. Drishtadyumna led his sister Draupadi onto the great stage. The people marveled at her beauty, and the Pandava brothers were no exception. This groom-choosing ceremony was unusual. It involved an exceptionally difficult challenge. A golden fish with a glass eye rotated at the top of a tall pole. A reflective surface was positioned at the bottom of the pole. To win the hand of Draupadi, the suitor would need to lift an incredibly heavy bow, string it, and then shoot an arrow to hit the eye of the moving golden fish at the top of the pole. But they would have to take aim and fire the arrow while looking at their target in the reflective surface below. King Draupadi had specifically designed such a difficult task because secretly he desired a son-in-law like the great warrior Arjuna. But as far as everyone knew, Arjuna had perished with the rest of the family in the burning house of Vandavat. So he would settle for a suitor who could at least come close to matching the skill of Arjuna. The potential suitors in the stadium grumbled at the ridiculous difficulty of the task presented. It seemed impossible. Nevertheless, many of the princes, kings, and great warriors assembled made their attempts. One by one, they failed hopelessly. Eventually, Kana, the close friend of Duryodhana, made his way to the arena to make his attempt. The people mumbled amongst themselves. Although Duryodhana had gifted Kana a kingdom, Kana was the adopted son of a charioteer, which made him of the class of laborers, the Shudra. Kana picked up the bow, but before he could make his attempt, Draupadi called out loudly and clearly, "I will not wed a Shudra." Kana grimaced as his blood boiled at the insult. The sun itself seemed to reflect his anger, but he held his composure
and put down the bow without making his attempt. Then, when it seemed that no one remained who was brave or foolish enough to make any further attempts, a young Brahmin made his way to the arena to try his hand. The people were shocked. A Brahmin attempting to achieve something that no Kshatriya could do? It was ridiculous. The young man was Arjuna in disguise. Chapter 18. Victory. The people marveled at this foolish young priest who was attempting to shoot the eye of the revolving fish. So many of the members of the Kshatriyas, the warrior class, had attempted the feat and all had failed. The one person who could possibly have succeeded was Karna, and he had been rebuked by Draupadi, since he was of Shudra, the laborer class. Now a priest, a member of the Brahmin class, was attempting a task that required great skill with a weapon of war. It was preposterous. The young man strung the bow with ease, and handled the weapon with a familiarity that contradicted his peaceful appearance. He looked at the moving target in the reflective pool and took aim. He held his breath and released the arrow. The arrow flew through the air and found the eye of the golden fish dead on target. The crowd went silent. The kings, princes, and the rest of the Kshatriya class of warriors were shocked. They could not believe what they saw. Then the silent disbelief turned to scowls of anger. This is a trick. Draupadi has brought us here to make fools of us. There is no way a Brahmin boy could exceed us in the use of a weapon of war. The crowd of Kshatriyas was turning into a mob. Kill Draupadi, burn his daughter, shouted one. A crowd of Kshatriyas stormed towards the royal family, weapons in hand. Arjuna loaded the bow and with ease dispatched the approaching mob. Karna watched the happenings with interest. He too believed the Brahmin's victory was a trick or a simple matter of luck. He released a volley of arrows at the young Brahmin, but Arjuna, in the disguise of the Brahmin, easily countered all of Karna's attacks. Then he released his own attack on Karna. Karna deflected the attack, but just barely, and it required all of his great skill to not be killed by the young man. Karna was shocked. Never had he witnessed such great archery skills, and from a Brahmin? With a tone of wonder and admiration, Karna asked, "Who are you, young Brahmin? Are you Lord Vishnu or Indra in human disguise? I have fought no other warrior with your level of skill." Arjuna, with a disguised voice, shouted out, "My guru has taught me all there is to know in the weapons of war. You are no match for me, Karna. Beware." And Karna, for the first time in any of his battles, felt fear. Other Kshatriyas, such as the incredibly strong Shalya, joined in the attack, but he was easily taken out by beam. Arjuna's other brothers also joined in the defense, supported by Brahmins in the crowd with them. Much of the audience left the stadium to avoid injury, but almost all remained bewildered as to who these mysterious Brahmins might be. However, the true identity of the 5 Brahmins could not be hidden from one in the stadium. In this form, he was the nephew of Kunti and cousin to the Pandava brothers. He of the Yadava clan, Lord Krishna. Chapter 19. The 5 Husbands. Once the crowd had settled down, Draupadi completed the Swayamvara by garlanding the winner and accepting the Brahmin as a husband. The outcome had puzzled King Draupadi. A Brahmin who was able to succeed in such a difficult archery competition was most unusual. Draupadi instructed his son Dristadumna to investigate the matter further. The Brahmins left the stadium with Draupadi and set off to their rented home in Panchala. Before entering the home, Arjuna playfully called out, "Mother, look what I have brought home." Kunti, who was deep in prayer, replied, "Whatever it might be, make sure to share equally with your brothers." When Kunti turned and saw Draupadi, she realized her mistake and was horrified. She had thought Arjuna had returned with food for their dinner. Now they were in a quandary. To fulfill dharma, right action, a mother's words must be adhered to. Kunti turned to Yudhishthir the Just to get guidance on the situation. But before he could answer, Draupadi spoke out. Mother, do not be concerned. This situation was preordained. Sometime after my firebirth, sage Vyasa visited and provided more insight into my past. In my previous life, I performed great penance to obtain a wish from Lord Shiva. I asked for a husband who would be a symbol of dharma, justice. He should be as strong as Lord Hanuman. He should be as skilled in archery as Lord Parashurama. He should be as intelligent as Lord Brihaspati. And he should be the most handsome man on earth. Lord Shiva replied that such qualities were not possible to be contained in a single mortal. This would upset the natural balance of nature. Nevertheless, I repeated my desire to Lord Shiva 5 times, and finally he acquiesced. I see now how the Lord has granted my wish. Just then, a knock at the door interrupted them. It was Lord Krishna and his brother Balarama. Lord Krishna had recognized the Pandavas at the Swayamvara and came to pay his respects to his aunt Kunti and his cousins. The family was overjoyed to see them, and Kunti related all that had happened to her nephew. Lord Krishna advised that the marriage of Draupadi was in full accordance with Dharma, since, in addition to Lord Shiva's blessing, the 5 Pandava brothers also shared one soul. They were all incarnations of Lord Indra. This settled Kunti, and they discussed how they would break the news to King Drupad. However, all that they had discussed inside the house would make its way to King Drupad quicker than they imagined. Hiding outside the home, Drupad's son Drishtadyumna had overheard everything. Chapter 20. The Divided Kingdom. The news of the Pandavas being alive made its way to Hastinapur rapidly. Now that the Pandava brothers were united with King Drupad's family, they had the protection of the kingdom of Panchala. This disturbed King Dhritarashtra and his son Duryodhana. Now that Yudhishthir was an adult, by rights the throne of Hastinapur should pass to him. He was the eldest son of King Pandu, and Dhritarashtra served only as the caretaker king. The fact that the failed assassination of the Pandava family was a plot by Duryodhana was now an open secret. In council with Karna, they discussed a possible attack on Panchala, to take the kingdom and slay the Pandavas. But to wage open war, they would need the blessing of grandfather Bhishma and Prime Minister Vidura. Bhishma and Vidura quickly dismissed the ridiculous idea. By rights, the throne should pass to Yudhishthir, but to keep peace, they proposed a division in the kingdom. Half that would be ruled by Yudhishthir, and the other half by Duryodhana. Dhritarashtra grudgingly agreed, and the region of Indraprastha was granted to Yudhishthir. The Pandavas agreed to the terms, and Yudhishthir began his reign in the region. Yudhishthir was the symbol of justice, truth, and moral duty. The region under his kingship quickly became prosperous, and they built a new capital called Indraprastha. One day, the Pandavas were visited by sage Narada. The sage warned them the situation with Draupadi as their common wife could lead to division between the brothers, which would be the greatest threat to the kingdom. In consultation with the sage, Draupadi and her husbands came to an agreement that if any of the other brothers entered the chambers of Draupadi while she was with another brother, the offending brother would need to spend 12 years in exile. One day, a priest came to Arjuna begging for assistance. Robbers were taking his cattle. To capture them and recover the farmer's belongings, Arjuna would have to act fast. However, his weapons happened to be in Draupadi's chamber. It was Arjuna's duty to act as protector to the people, and without a second thought, he entered the chamber and retrieved his weapons. Draupadi was with Yudhishthir at the time. Arjuna made short work of the thieves, but he would now have to face the consequences of his action.
Chapter 21. Exile. Arjuna returned after dispatching the robbers, ready to accept his penance. Yudhishthir and his other brothers tried to convince him otherwise, but Arjuna was determined to accept the consequences of his action. 12 years in exile. Arjuna left the kingdom and traveled across the lakes and into the forests. He eventually reached the source of the river Ganga. One morning, when Arjuna was bathing in the river and performing his morning rituals, a powerful force grabbed him and took him under the water to the kingdom of Kauravas. It was the Naga princess Ulupi who had drawn him to the area. "O prince, I saw you when you entered the water and have fallen in love with you. I am unmarried and I desire a child. Grant me this wish, dear prince, and I will greatly reward you." Arjuna was taken aback and resisted at first, but the power of the Naga princess had enthralled him. He married Ulupi, and sometime later she gave birth to a son named Iravan. Eventually, Arjuna needed to continue his journey. Ulupi granted him the power to vanquish any amphibious creature and be invincible in water. Arjuna thanked her and continued his pilgrimage, visiting many holy sites, descending the Himalayan slopes, passing the Mahendra mountains, continuing his trek along the coast, and eventually arriving in Manipur. In Manipur, he was welcomed by King Chitravarna. The king had only one child, Chitrangada, who was trained as a warrior and was very beautiful. Arjuna fell in love with her and asked the king for her hand in marriage. Chitravarna agreed, but on the condition that the son born to them must remain in the kingdom and become the successor to the throne of Manipur. Arjuna accepted, and he married Chitrangada in a grand wedding. The prince spent many years in Manipur, and after a son was born, he left the kingdom and continued his journey. His son was named Babhruvana, and he would become the king of Manipur when he reached maturity. Arjuna then went down to the southern oceans and spent time with the ascetics. The ascetics told Arjuna that they had to abandon 5 ponds near the village due to the fierce crocodiles that lived there. Arjuna traveled to the first pond and went into the water to have a bath. A giant crocodile grabbed him, but Arjuna seized the crocodile and threw it out of the water. As soon as the crocodile landed on dry land, it transformed into a beautiful woman. The young maiden informed Arjuna that she and her 4 companions were angels of heaven that had been cursed to live as crocodiles in the pond. The curse could only be broken by a mighty prince who could drag them out of the water. Arjuna pulled the other 4 crocodiles out of the water and freed the maidens. The woman thanked him and returned to the heavens. Arjuna continued his journey, eventually reaching Prabhasa, where he was met by a dear friend. Chapter 22. Dwarka. The news of Arjuna's imminent arrival at Prabhasa had reached Lord Krishna, and he travelled out to meet the mighty prince. After joyous greetings, they left for Dwarka. The citizens of Dwarka were very eager to see Arjuna, and they came in the hundreds of thousands to witness the arrival of the famous prince. Arjuna spent many days in Krishna's palace. One day, Arjuna saw a beautiful woman who captured his heart. Lord Krishna noticed this and approved. The woman's name was Subhadra, and she was the half-sister of Lord Krishna. Arjuna conferred with Krishna as to how he could win the hand of Subhadra. "O mighty prince, a Swayamvara, a groom-choosing ceremony, is being planned for the princess. But one never knows what might be the outcome of such a process. You are a Kshatriya, a warrior prince, and as such, you could win her hand by abduction. This is permissible by Kshatriya law. Your grandfather Bhishma gained the hands of the princesses Ambika and Ambalika in this way. During a religious ceremony, having worshipped the king of the mountains and obtained the blessings of all the gods and all the Brahmanas, Subhadra circled the mountain and then set out to return to Dwarka. Arjuna rushed at her and swooped her onto his chariot. Abducting the beautiful princess, Arjuna raced away. Subhadra's guards were hopelessly unable to catch the prince. The elders of the Yadava clan were furious. Balram, Subhadra's brother, made plans to go out with a large army to capture the rogue prince. But all were curious as to the silence of Lord Krishna in the matter. "What are your thoughts on the situation, my lord?" asked Balaram. "Arjun is the most supreme of Kshatriya princes. There is no better match for the princess Subhadra. If you attempt to capture him, the mighty Arjun will surely humiliate all your military forces. Heed my words, accept the match. Bring Arjun and Subhadra back to Dwarka and have them married with all the proper rites and ceremony as befit the royal couple." Appeased by Lord Krishna's words, Arjun and Subhadra returned to Dwarka and were married. Arjun lived in Dwarka for a year, and the prince spent the last part of his exile in Pushkara. After the 12 years were over, Arjun returned to Indraprastha with Subhadra. But what would be the reaction of the queen, his wife, Draupadi? Chapter 23. Return to Indraprastha. When Arjun returned to Indraprastha with Subhadra as his new wife, Draupadi was not pleased. Although Draupadi loved all her husbands, Arjun held an especially dear place in her heart. Subhadra approached Draupadi with humility. She apologized for Arjuna's indiscretions and promised to do everything she could to make amends. Draupadi was mollified and eventually forgave Arjun and Subhadra. She accepted them both, and she became close friends with Subhadra. Subhadra eventually gave birth to a son named Abhimanyu. He was the favorite of his uncle Krishna and quickly became a skilled warrior, undergoing training with each of the Pandava brothers. In time, Draupadi also gave birth to 5 children: Prativandya, Sutasoma, Shrutakama, Satanika, and Shrutasena. They became known as the Upa-Pandavas. Krishna remained close friends with Arjun, and he spent much of his time in Indraprastha. One day, Krishna and Arjuna were walking along the river when they were approached by a Brahmin who asked for help. "How would you like us to help you?" asked Arjun. "I am extremely hungry," said the Brahmin, "and my hunger can only be sated by consuming the Khandava forest and everything in it." The Brahmin revealed himself to be Agni, the god of fire. The Khandava forest had over the years become a nest for thieves and murderers. Agni had tried many times to consume the forest, but the forest was protected by Indra, the king of the gods. Each time Agni set the forest ablaze, Indra sent down rain to put out the fire. Arjuna and Krishna agreed to help Agni. "But if we are to fight Indra, we would need special weapons," said Arjuna. Agni summoned the water god, who provided Arjuna with the Gandhava, the most powerful bow in the world, and 2 quivers that never ran out of arrows. He also provided Arjuna with a golden chariot pulled by 4 white horses. To Lord Krishna, he provided the Sudarshana Chakra, a divine discus that could cut through anything. With his protectors suitably armed, Agni set the forest ablaze. But it was not long before the situation was brought to Indra's attention. Chapter 24. Fire God. The fire god Agni, in his blazing form, began to consume the Khandava forest. Due to his friendship with the Naga, Takshaka, who resided in the forest with his clan, Indra, the king of the gods, had sworn to protect the forest. Indra sent down showers of rain to put out the fire, but Agni was protected by Arjuna and Lord Krishna. Agni had also armed his protectors with celestial weapons. Arjuna released thousands of arrows with his Gandhava bow, which warded off the rain. Lord Krishna blocked off the forest so that Agni could complete his meal. Furious, Lord Indra raised a violent storm with billowing clouds and howling gales. The storm rendered Arjuna unconscious for a few moments. This allowed some creatures to escape. When Arjuna recovered, he aimed his arrows straight at Lord Indra. Indra retaliated with thunder and lightning. Arjuna invoked a mantra and released the Vyasa missile, which dispelled the clouds. The sun shone through, and Agni continued his blazing feast. Further enraged, Lord Indra increased the force of his attack. He amassed a number of gods and attacked the protectors of Agni directly. But they were no match for the combined power of Lord Krishna and Arjuna. The gods accompanying Indra scattered, and Lord Indra pressed on with his attack alone. Suddenly Indra heard a voice. Khandava forest is fated to burn. Know Lord Krishna and the Prince Arjuna to be invincible. Turn back and return to your abode. Indra withdrew, and Lord Krishna and Arjuna let out a triumphant roar. As Agni continued his feast, a mysterious figure ran out of the forest towards Arjuna. Protect me, dear prince. Save me. Arjuna agreed and granted the Asura asylum. Agni completed his meal, and the infested forest was reduced to ashes. Lord Indra returned and paid homage to Lord Krishna and Arjuna. He was impressed with Arjuna's great skill and offered him a wish for anything he desired. Arjuna asked Indra for various celestial weapons. When Lord Shiva's grace falls upon you, I shall give you all my weapons, replied Indra, and then he departed. Then the Asura, who was rescued by Arjuna, spoke out. I am Mayasura, the architect of the Asuras. I also wish to serve you in some way. Grant your wish to Lord Krishna, replied Arjuna. What is your wish, my lord? Asked Mayasura. Lord Krishna smiled and replied, Build a palace for Yudhishthir, and let it be one that all men marvel at. Chapter 25. Palace of Illusion. Grateful for being rescued by the Prince Arjuna, and at the request of Lord Krishna, Mayasura, the architect of the Asuras, began construction of a magnificent palace for King Yudhishthira. When the palace was completed, it was named Mayasabha. It was a wondrous architectural marvel, known for its illusionary design. The walls were encrusted with precious jewels and gems. The floors looked like flowing water, and in other areas, pools of water looked like floors. Some walls appeared to have doors that were actually an illusion, while other walls that appeared smooth actually had doors that were invisible to the eye. Special guests and dignitaries from far and wide came to the palace to admire the breathtaking wonders. One day, sage Narada visited Yudhishthira. He informed the king of the unfulfilled wish of his father, King Pandu. Pandu was to perform the Rajasuya Yagna, which would have made him the king of all Kshatriyas, effectively becoming the king of the world. Pandu passed before he could fulfill this desire. As the eldest son, it now fell to Yudhishthira to fulfill his father's dream. Sage Narada advised him it was the right time to begin preparations for the ceremony. Yudhishthira was conflicted. In order to perform the Rajasuya Yagna, he would need the support of all other Kshatriyas, the leaders, kings and princes. He sought the counsel of Lord Krishna in the matter. You are qualified for the position, Yudhishthira, said Lord Krishna. You are a wise and just king. But there is one who would stand in your way, King Jarasindha of Magadha. He will attempt to obstruct the Yagna. He has conquered many kingdoms and has imprisoned 99 Kshatriyas, which he intends to sacrifice to his deity. Many of the other Kshatriyas support him out of fear. What do you propose we do in this situation, my lord? Inquired Yudhishthira. Jarasindha will have to be defeated, and the imprisoned kings freed. Arjuna, Bhim, and I will travel to Magadha We shall challenge Jarasandha to a duel with one of us. Jarasandha's great ego will force him to choose Bhim, and Bhim will surely defeat him in combat. Yudhishthir reluctantly agreed, and the trio set off for Magadha. Upon arrival in the kingdom, they were immediately brought to the attention of Jarasandha. "What is the meaning of this? Why are you here?" demanded Jarasandha. Lord Krishna informed Jarasandha of Yudhishthir's intention to perform the Rajasuya Yagna. "You are all that stands in his way. Your imprisonment of the kings goes against all dharma, and as such, you must be defeated. We challenge you to combat, and you may choose any of the three of us as your match." Jarasandha was a magnificent wrestler, and as Lord Krishna predicted, his great ego made him choose Bhim. The challenge began, and raged on for 13 days. Many times, Bhim whirled Jarasandha above his head and slammed him to the ground, but Jarasandha always recovered and continued the match. Eventually Bhim grabbed the feet of Jarasandha and tore him in two. But even this did not end the battle, as Jarasandha had a secret. Chapter 26 King of Kings. When King Jarasandha was born, in an unusual twist of fate, he was born in two halves. A demoness used dark magic to stitch the two halves together, and as a result, Jarasandha was near invincible in battle. During their match, Bhim had torn Jarasandha along that seam. Thinking their contest over, Bhim walked away, but a maniacal laugh made him look back. The dark magic that joined Jarasandha's two halves together was still in effect, and he recovered from Bhim's attack, ready to do battle once more. Bhim was at his wit's end. He looked to Lord Krishna for guidance. Lord Krishna plucked a leaf from a nearby tree, tore it in half, and tossed the pieces in opposite directions from each other. Bhim understood. He tore Jarasandha apart once more, but this time he tossed the right half to the left and the left half to the right. This destroyed the dark magic that kept him alive, and Jarasandha was finally defeated. Taking control of Magadha, Lord Krishna, Arjuna and Bhim freed the kings that Jarasandha had imprisoned. They were grateful for their freedom and pledged their support to Yudhishthir in his bid to become the world king. Lord Krishna appointed Jarasandha's son Sahadeva as the new king of Magadha. Unlike his father, Sahadeva was a wise and righteous young man and would make a just king for Magadha. Likewise, he also pledged his support to Yudhishthir. With all the pieces now in place, Yudhishthir proceeded with the Rajasuya Yagna. Hundreds of kings arrived in Indraprastha for the ceremony, including King Dhritarashtra, his son Duryodhana, grandfather Bhishma, Guru Drona, and the rest of the Kauravas. The ceremony ran over many days. Brahmins performed careful and precise rituals. During the Rajasuya Yagna, kings and representatives from different regions were invited to participate. They would pay homage to Yudhishthir, acknowledge his supremacy, and offer gifts as a symbol of their acceptance of him as the world king. The ceremony was not without incident. King Shishupala was a cousin of the Pandavas and Lord Krishna. He had received a curse from a sage named Vyasa in his early years. According to the curse, Shishupala would meet his end when he committed 100 heinous acts. Due to his envy and animosity towards Lord Krishna, Shishupala consistently insulted and abused Lord Krishna during the Rajasuya Yagna. When he crossed the threshold of 100 offences, Lord Krishna unleashed the Sudarshana Chakra, the divine discus, and beheaded him, fulfilling the curse and putting an end to Shishupala's transgressions. After several days of festivities and rituals, the Rajasuya Yagna came to an end with final ceremonies and blessings. The participating kings and rulers departed from the Yagna, having acknowledged Yudhishthir's supremacy. However, Duryodhana remained in the palace for some time longer.
admiring the beauty and the craftsmanship, and within him he felt a great envy growing, and a deep hatred.
Chapter 27. The Insult. After the Rajasuya Yagna ended, Duryodhana, along with his uncle Shakuni, remained in the Pandavas' palace for some time longer. He marveled at the beauty of the palace, and with every moment that passed, his jealousy and hatred of the Pandavas grew. The palace, Mayasabha, was a spectacle of illusion. Areas that seemed like flowing water were actually solid floors, and vice versa. Duryodhana was fooled by one such illusion. He fell into a pool that looked like a solid floor. Draupadi, who was in an onlooking chamber, could not help but to burst out laughing. A blind son like the blind father, she blurted out. Duryodhana was deeply embarrassed, and his embarrassment quickly turned to rage. On their return trip to Hastinapur, he shared his grief with his uncle Shakuni. During his time in Indraprastha, Shakuni had heard tales of Yudhishthir's love of gambling. It was the one weakness of the otherwise virtuous king. Shakuni hatched a plan with his nephew Duryodhana. When they returned to Hastinapur, Duryodhana and Shakuni took up counsel with the blind king Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana relayed the insult of Draupadi to his father. Dhritarashtra's face squirmed in anger. By a twist of fate, he was born blind, and therefore the kingship was passed to his younger brother Pandu, and thereby to Pandu's descendants, the Pandavas. Dhritarashtra was thought incapable of kingship because of his blindness, and yet he had successfully ruled Hastinapur since Pandu's passing. As far as he was concerned, rightfully, the whole of the kingdom should pass to his son, Duryodhana. Shakuni and Duryodhana laid out their plans to regain the kingdom of the Pandavas, as well as the additional wealth they had acquired. King Dhritarashtra listened intently, but then he expressed some reservations. "I should seek the counsel of wise Vidura," said Dhritarashtra. "Vidura is the ally of the Pandavas, father. He shall surely rebuke our plans," replied Duryodhana. "We shall build a magnificent hall here in Hastinapur to rival the one that the Pandavas have. As part of the coronation, we shall have a gambling match. I shall place the wagers, and Uncle Shakuni shall play on my behalf. If you issue an invitation to Yudhishthir, by Kshatriya honor he must accept, and again, by Kshatriya honor he must accept the challenge of the game. Then Uncle Shakuni will help us regain our stolen kingdom." Chapter 28. A Game of Dice. Prime Minister Vidura, despite his protests, was forced to carry an invitation to King Yudhishthir. Vidura had tried to dissuade King Dhritarashtra against the gambling match proposed, but the blind king was easily swayed by the ambitions of his headstrong son. Yudhishthir suspected the ill intentions of his uncle and cousin when he received the invitation to the Hastinapur hall coronation, along with the proposed gambling match. He discussed the matter with Draupadi and his brothers, but by Kshatriya honor, he was bound to accept the invitation. Deep down, however, there was another reason. Yudhishthir had over the years developed a love of gambling. There was a thrill that took his mind off the usual stresses and responsibility of kingship. He fancied himself a skilled player and thought that he would have a good chance of winning. Yudhishthir accepted the invitation, and he, along with Draupadi and the rest of the Pandavas, set off for Hastinapur. The new hall created by the Kuru dynasty was nowhere near as magnificent as the one owned by the Pandavas. The craftsmen had lied to the blind king when they described the finishes and materials used in the construction. When the coronation was completed, the gambling match began as part of the evening's entertainment. Duryodhana set out the rules. He would stake the wager, and his uncle Shakuni would play on his behalf. In attendance and observing the game were the elders, King Dhritarashtra, Grandfather Bhishma, Prime Minister Vidura, as well as the Pandava brothers. Also in attendance was the rest of the Kaurava brothers, and Karna, Duryodhana's dear friend. Draupadi retired to her chambers. Yudhishthir, as the guest king and the elder of the Pandavas, would play the game himself as he preferred. The game of dice began, and Duryodhan began the wager with 1,000 horses. Yudhishthir rolled the dice, and Shakuni rolled the dice, and all in attendance eagerly awaited the outcome. "I win!" shouted Shakuni. Unknown to Yudhishthir, Shakuni was using a mantra-loaded dice, which meant that he would never lose. Duryodhan kept on raising the stakes: 10,000 servants, 100,000 soldiers, 300,000 chariots. Each time the dice was rolled, and each time Shakuni shouted out, "I win!" Yudhishthir, in the fever of the gamble, kept on trying to win back his losses. He kept the glimmer of hope that he could turn the tide, that his luck would change. The Kauravas rejoiced and cheered with every win. The Pandava brothers remained in silence. Vidura tried hopelessly to persuade King Dhritarashtra to end the game. As the host king, only Dhritarashtra had the power to put an end to the proceedings. But the king was as blind on the inside as well as the outside to the wickedness of his son. Each time the dice was rolled, he eagerly awaited the outcome, and he silently rejoiced at every one of his son's victories. But the worst was yet to come. Chapter 29. The Humiliation of Draupadi. Yudhishthir was hopelessly lost in the fever of the gambling match. Shakuni had mercilessly found and exploited the young king's weakness. Duryodhan viciously capitalized on their good fortune. Within a few rounds of the game, Yudhishthir had lost his kingdom and all of his wealth to the Kauravas. But this was not enough for Duryodhan. His hatred of the Pandavas consumed him. "You lost all of your fortune, Yudhishthir, but you still have an opportunity to win back your kingdom and home. Stake your brothers, and you will be able to play another round." Yudhishthir was a shadow of the noble king he once was. "I agree. I wager my brothers." Another roll of the dice commenced, and once again Shakuni shouted out, "I win." Duryodhan pressed further. "Wager yourself, Yudhishthir, and perhaps you will be able to win your brothers back." Yet another roll of the dice, and again Shakuni shouted out, "I win." "You are now our slave, Yudhishthir. You have just one possession left to you. Wager your wife, Draupadi, and perhaps you will be able to win freedom for yourself and your brothers." Cold sweat dripped down Yudhishthir's face, and as if in a trance, he muttered out, "I agree. I stake Draupadi, the foremost among all women." Yudhishthir rolled the dice. Shakuni rolled the dice. The blind king Dhritarashtra excitedly asked, "Who has won? What is the result?" Duryodhan let out a triumphant roar, and the Kaurava kin jumped to their feet in giddy excitement. Uncle Shakuni had delivered their final victory. "Vidura, bring Draupadi down to the court. She is now our maid," shouted out Duryodhan. Vidura had witnessed the evening's proceedings with disgust. Many times he had tried in vain to get King Dhritarashtra to put an end to the match. "It seems my counsel is no longer required in this court, Duryodhan. I resign my position. I will have no further involvement in this sinful behavior." Duryodhan was drunk with victory, and Vidura's defiance barely registered. "Brother Dusashan, you go to Draupadi's chambers and bring her here to us." Dusashan gladly agreed and bounded off to Draupadi's chambers. Draupadi was settling in for the night when Dusashan burst into her chambers. "What is the meaning of this?" she frightfully exclaimed. "Your husband has lost his kingdom, his brothers, himself, and you in the gambling match. Your presence is commanded in court, dear queen. You are now our slave." Dusashan mockingly replied. Draupadi was shocked and confused, and confusion
then turned to anger. What sinful behavior? Tell me, did Yudhishthir have the right to gamble me in a match? Did he lose himself before he wagered me? Dusashan was in no mood for questions. He grabbed Draupadi by the hair and dragged her down to the court. The Kauravas were in full celebration. Karna now had the opportunity for revenge against Draupadi. She is our slave. Strip her naked. Dusashan gleefully obliged as he pulled on Draupadi's garment. Chapter 30. Divine Intervention. Draupadi found herself in the middle of a living nightmare. Yudhishthir, in a gambling fever, had lost his kingdom, his wealth, his brothers, himself, and his wife. Dusashan had dragged Draupadi down to the court by her hair. What is the meaning of this? Have you no shame? Will the elders of the court not defend me? Grandfather Bhishma was honor bound to follow and defend the throne of Hastinapur. He could do nothing. The blind king Dhritarashtra was slave to the whims of his ambitious son. Draupadi's husbands had been lost to the Kauravas in the game of dice. They were now the slaves of the Kauravas, according to dharmic rule. Karna had long held a grudge against Draupadi, since he was rebuked by her in the Swayamvara. She is no longer royalty. Strip her naked, and she can join the servants in their quarters. Duryodhan happily agreed and tapped his thigh in a lustful manner as he leered at Draupadi. Dusashan pulled at Draupadi's garment, unraveling it from her body. Draupadi prayed, and Lord Krishna's grace filled the room. As much as Dusashan pulled, there seemed no end to the fabric unraveling from Draupadi. He eventually collapsed in exhaustion. Bhim, who was bound by dharmic law to accept the actions of his older brother and the Kaurava elders, seemed to awake from slumber. He could hold his tongue no longer. Dusashan, you vile creature! I vow to crack open your chest on the battlefield and wash Draupadi's hair with your blood. I shall break Duryodhan's thigh with my mace. Arjuna, the greatest among all archers, shall slay Karna, and Sahadev shall end the wickedness of sly Shakuni. This I swear, else I vow never to enter the heavens. Bhim's terrible oath shocked the room, and King Dhritarashtra at last seemed to be pulled from his slumber. This is wrong. No, we have made a grave error. What have we done? Dhritarashtra realized the evil he was supporting, and he nullified the results of the game. Dhritarashtra restored the kingdom to Yudhishthir and granted the Pandavas their freedom. The Pandavas and Draupadi departed Hastinapur immediately. Duryodhan was infuriated by his father's actions. Father, we had them. We had everything we desired. Now the Pandavas will go back to their kingdom and raise their armies against us. We are doomed. The blind king Dhritarashtra was confused, and now uncertain of his actions. What shall we do, Duryodhan? Duryodhan smiled as he had another idea. Send out the guard. Order Yudhishthir to return for another match of dice. This time, the stakes will be different.
Chapter 31. Pandavas in Exile. Yudhishthir and his family were intercepted on their way back to Indraprastha, and were once again drawn into a game of dice. Yudhishthir, driven by Kshatriya honor, was compelled to accept the challenge once more. This time, Duryodhan proposed an exceptionally unusual wager. The losers would endure 13 years of exile. 12 years would be spent in the wilderness, while the 13th year would involve hiding within a city. If discovered during that year, an additional 12 years of exile would be imposed. As the game unfolded, Yudhishthir found himself once more on the losing side. The Pandavas prepared themselves for their time in the wilderness. Due to her frailty, Kunti, their mother, remained behind with their uncle Vidura in Hastinapur. Draupadi's 5 children, Subhadra, and Abhimanyu were entrusted to Lord Krishna's care in Dwarka. News of the Pandavas' exile spread to the citizens of Hastinapur and Indraprastha. Many wished to accompany their beloved king into the wilderness, but Yudhishthir, humbled by their love, asked them to stay behind and watch over Mother Kunti. Numerous sages accompanied the Pandavas, aiding them in establishing their new home. Amidst the Pandavas, feelings of resentment simmered. Draupadi and Bhima expressed their anger at Yudhishthir's unwavering adherence to Kshatriya law and his addiction to gambling. Their current predicament fell squarely on Yudhishthir's shoulders. Bhima, at one point during the game of dice, called for fire to burn Yudhishthir's hands. Arjuna intervened to pacify his hot-tempered brother. Arjuna displayed an unusual sense of acceptance towards their circumstances. He suspected that Duryodhana's scheme aimed to utilize the 13 years to amass a formidable army for defeating the Pandavas in battle. Arjuna was a warrior prince by birth, and within him a fire for conquest burned. To some degree, he looked forward to the thrill of combat. Nakula and Sahadev remained unwaveringly loyal to their elder brothers, committed to fulfilling their duties, regardless of the challenges. Yudhishthir grappled with guilt over their misfortune, plagued by remorse for his actions. As the eldest, he felt responsibility for providing for his family. However, the Pandavas' home frequently welcomed friends, well-wishers, and sages, increasing their responsibilities. In his time of need, sage Vyasa visited Yudhishthir and offered guidance. Vyasa advised Yudhishthir to seek the blessings of Lord Surya, the sun god, whose radiance nourishes the earth and sustains life. The young king embarked on a rigorous period of austerities. And finally, one day, his efforts bore fruit. Chapter 32. Arjuna's Quest. Following Yudhishthir's intense austerities, Surya, the sun god, smiled upon the young king. The sun god presented Yudhishthir with a pot which had mystical properties. Give this pot to Draupadi. Any meal the queen prepares in this pot will be inexhaustible for the day, until she takes her own meal. Then the pot will remain empty. The pot's mystical properties would renew the next day with the touch of the sun's rays. Grateful for this gift, Yudhishthir returned with the means to feed his family and the many citizens who sought refuge with them. Sage Vyasa alerted Yudhishthir to the Kauravas' preparations for a massive army. Arjuna was tasked with embarking on a quest to acquire the divine weapons of Lord Indra, preparing themselves for the impending battle. Arjuna accepted this responsibility, bidding sorrowful farewells before setting forth on his journey. Heading north in the direction of the Himalayas, he journeyed for months until encountering a sage immersed in deep meditation. Upon awakening, the sage questioned Arjuna's purpose. "I seek Lord Indra," replied Arjuna. "I am in search of great weapons for the difficult battle that lies ahead." "You have reached the place of sages and saints, Prince Arjuna. There is no need for the tribulations of humanity here. Rest in the pleasures of heaven," said the sage. But Arjuna held fast in his mission. He was to obtain the weapons which would help his family gain victory in the war ahead. The sage revealed himself to be Lord Indra. "You are indeed valiant, Prince Arjuna. Continue your journey to Mount Kailash. You will have all of my weapons when you obtain the blessings of Lord Shiva." Arjuna's journey continued, marked by years of unyielding travel and rigorous penance. Despite spending months in deep meditation, he struggled to locate Lord Shiva. One fateful day, while in meditation, Arjuna sensed an aggressive charge from a wild boar. Swiftly responding, he drew his bow and released an arrow, only to find another arrow matching his own striking the boar simultaneously. From the shadows emerged a mysterious hunter. "The boar was my prey," shouted out Arjuna. "Who are you to dare to intervene in the kill of a Kshatriya prince?" Your skills are no match for me, arrogant prince. Go back to your kingdom, replied the hunter. Arjuna was frustrated and infuriated. A battle of archery skills erupted between the hunter and the prince. As they clashed in a battle of arrows, terror gripped the surrounding inhabitants. Days passed in intense engagement, with Arjuna's frustration mounting and fatigue setting in. Arjuna realized that the hunter's skills rivaled, if not surpassed, his own. Was his journey to end in confronting this, his ultimate adversary? Chapter 33. Shiva's Grace. Arjuna was at his wit's end. Never in his life had he encountered an adversary so skilled. He had traveled far and sacrificed much in search of the weapons that would save his family. Was he now to fall in battle, unfulfilled in his quest? Arjuna broke from the battle and created a lingam with the soil around him. He then gathered flowers to make a garland. He placed the garland on the lingam and prayed to Lord Shiva. When Arjuna opened his eyes, to his surprise, the mysterious hunter stood in front of him with the garland Arjuna had made around his neck. A bright light enveloped the stranger as Lord Shiva revealed his true form. Arjuna dropped to his knees and humbly folded his hands. "My lord, forgive me for my arrogance," said Arjuna. "Rise, valiant prince. You have indeed proved yourself worthy. There is no warrior in the earthly realms or the heavens who is your equal," said Lord Shiva. "Ask for your boon, young prince, and I will grant it." "My lord, if you deem me to be worthy, I wish to possess the mightiest weapon, the Pashupatastra, the celestial missile," replied Arjuna. "I grant you this weapon, dear prince. But remember, the Pashupatastra is capable of vanquishing all beings and even destroying creation itself, if used incorrectly. It is only to be deployed in the most dire of circumstances, and never against a lesser foe." Lord Shiva then disappeared. And with a flash of light, Arjuna was then greeted by Lord Indra and other gods, who also blessed him with their divine weapons and knowledge. Arjuna was overjoyed at having achieved his goal. "Before you return to your family, dear prince, you must spend time with me in my home," requested Lord Indra. A celestial vehicle arrived and whisked the Prince Arjuna to the heavens. Arjuna was greeted by majestic sights and sounds. A grand celebration welcomed him, with dancers and musicians providing entertainment. Indra taught Arjuna how to wield various weapons, including the thunderbolt. Despite receiving these incredible gifts, Arjuna could not shake his longing for his brothers and his wife Draupadi. Indra insisted that he stay for 5 years in the heavenly realms. At Indra's request, Arjuna also learned the art of dance and music from Chitrasena, the Gandhara. These arts were unknown on earth. Even with all these blessings, Arjuna's heart still yearned to return to his family. However, there was one enchanting woman in the heavenly realms who had captured Arjuna's attention. Urvasi, the Aspara. Chapter 34. Urvasi's Curse. During his stay in Lord Indra's heavenly abode, Arjuna not only mastered all the divine weapons bestowed upon him, but also honed his warrior skills to an unparalleled level, making him unmatched in both earthly and celestial realms. At Lord Indra's request, he even became proficient in the delicate art of dance and music. Among the celestial beings residing in Lord Indra's palace was Urvasi and Aspara. Many meaningful glances were exchanged between Urvasi and the valiant Prince Arjuna. Urvasi, smitten by Arjuna's handsome and virtuous character, couldn't resist her feelings, and one night found her way to his chambers, surprising him. "Prince Arjuna," she implored, "satisfy my desires. Mighty warrior, your virtues have captured my heart, and I am under the spell of the god of love." Arjuna was taken aback and responded, "Blessed lady, please do not speak to me in this way, for you are undoubtedly equal to the wife of a superior. You are to be revered just as my mother Kunti or Saki, the wife of Indra, are to be worshipped. While it's true that I paid attention to you, there was a specific reason for it. I remembered that you were the mother of the Kuru race, having chosen Puru as your husband. O blessed Aspara, you should not harbor any other feelings towards me, for you are my superior, being the mother of my lineage. Urvasi replied, O son of Indra, Asparas are free to choose their mates. You should not consider me superior in this matter. The sons and grandsons of the Puru race have come here because of their ascetic merit, and have interacted with us without incurring sin. Therefore, do not send me away, O hero, for I am burning with desire. Indeed, I regard you as a mother, Arjuna honestly stated. So I bow my head before you, and prostrate myself at your feet. You deserve the reverence of a mother, and I beseech you to protect me as a son. However, Arjuna's rejection left Urvasi extremely angry. Trembling with rage, she cursed Arjuna, saying, I curse you to become impotent, and spend your time amongst females as a dancer, scorned as a eunuch. With these words of anger, Urvasi returned to her abode. Upon learning of Arjuna's rejection of Urvasi, Indra embraced his son and consoled him. Your patience and self-control have even surpassed that of the sages. Do not be troubled by Urvasi's curse. It will serve you well in your final year of exile, when you must live incognito. During that time, you will endure the effects of her curse. But once that year is over, your manhood will be restored. Chapter 35. Hanuman. The Pandava brothers and Draupadi missed Arjuna dearly. They had not heard from him in years and feared the worst. Yudhishthir still harbored a deep guilt for their circumstances as a result of his actions. One fateful day, their home received an unexpected visitor, sage Narada. Known for his mystical sight, Narada brought tidings of Arjuna's success in acquiring divine weapons. The family was overjoyed by this news. Narada advised Yudhishthir to make the most of the time until Arjuna's return by embarking on a sacred pilgrimage to the divine places of worship. In agreement, Yudhishthir and his family set off to travel to various sacred sites. They performed acts of worship and paid their respects at the revered places they visited. One morning, while Draupadi and Bhim sat along the serene banks of a river, Draupadi spotted a beautiful flower drifting downstream. She picked it up and thought, this would make a splendid garland for Yudhishthir, but I need more. She turned to Bhim and asked, Bhim, could you fetch more of these flowers from up the mountain? Bhim readily agreed and embarked on his journey to collect the flowers, while Draupadi returned to their dwelling. As Bhim ascended the mountain, he encountered an unusual obstruction in his path. A monkey's tail stretched across his way. Bhim hesitated to leap over the tail, finding it disrespectful. Instead, he struck the ground with his mace to awaken the monkey. The monkey stirred and inquired about Bhim's purpose. Bhim replied, Your tail blocks my path, dear monkey. Please remove it so that I may continue on my journey. The monkey responded, I am weary and in need of rest. You may move tail yourself and proceed. Annoyed, Bhim reached down to lift the monkey's tail, but to his astonishment, it wouldn't budge. He used both hands and exerted all his immense strength, but still, the tail remained immovable. Bhim, who had consumed the Naga potion in his youth, granting him the strength of 10,000 elephants, was baffled by his inability to move a mere monkey's tail. It dawned on him that this was no ordinary monkey. With humility, Bhim folded his hands and beseeched the monkey to reveal its true form. In a blinding flash of light, the monkey transformed into Lord Hanuman. Bhim dropped to his knees, overwhelmed by the divine presence. Lord Hanuman lifted Bhim to his feet and embraced him, saying, My dear Bhim, I have yearned to meet you for a long time. We are spiritual brothers, both blessings of Varuna, the wind god. Forgive my playful teasing. Bhim was excited to meet his older brother, and they talked for hours. Lord Hanuman then guided Bhim, revealing two distinct paths. This path leads to heaven. No mortal may pass this way. This is the path you must take. It leads to the flowers you seek. But beware, for these flowers grow in the heavenly garden owned by Lord Kubera. It is guarded by celestial beings, and they will not yield them easily. Chapter 36. Arjuna's Return. Bhim, guided by his brother Hanuman, eventually reached the garden of celestial flowers. He quenched his thirst and then began collecting the flowers. "Stop! This is the garden of Lord Kubera. No outsiders are allowed here," a loud voice shouted out. "I am Bhim, the son of King Pandu. These flowers are not in Kubera's abode. They have sprung from the breast of the mountain, and they belong to me as much as anyone else." Bhim waded in further to collect more flowers. 100 of the celestial guards attacked Bhim, and with waves of his mighty mace, Bhim smashed them all away. The surviving guards ran back to their master Kubera. When Kubera heard of the incident, the Lord of Wealth smiled. "Let the Pandava prince take as many flowers as he likes." When Bhim returned home, he was greeted with a spectacular sight. A celestial vehicle had returned with their beloved brother Arjun. Arjun embraced his brothers and Draupadi. He handed many gifts to Draupadi, and the weapons he had collected he handed to his eldest brother Yudhishthir. Arjuna enthralled his brothers and Draupadi through the night with tales of his time in Indra's abode. He spoke of the rigorous training he had undertaken and the curse he received from Urvasi, which he would have to endure in their final year of exile. Before leaving the heavenly realms, Lord Indra had one final request. The inhabitants of the flying city of Nivatakavacha had received a boon from Lord Brahma, which made them unconquerable by the demigods. Over the years, they abused this power and wreaked havoc in the heavenly realms. Arjun was tasked with conquering the city and proving his mettle as a warrior. As Arjun approached the city, the inhabitants flew out and attacked him in their numbers. They used many demonic illusions and fought with fierce weapons, but he was able to defeat them all with Indra's thunderbolt weapons and the various other divine weapons in his possession. Finally, Arjun brought down the entire city with a mantra-charged astra, and in doing so, he had succeeded where Lord Indra himself could not. Arjun's brothers were in awe of his tale and begged to see the weapons in action. Arjun gladly obliged. He took out his Gandhava bow and commenced to show the weapons in order. When the divine astras had been set, the earth began to tremble and the sun hid itself in the clouds. Suddenly, sage Narada appeared. "O Arjun, these weapons should never be discharged when there is no fit object, and when there is a fit object, they should not be released unless so pressed by the opponent. To discharge weapons without occasion is unwise. These weapons, when properly kept, will increase your strength and happiness, but if they are not properly kept, they can destroy the three worlds. Your brothers will behold these weapons soon enough, when you will use them for vanquishing your enemies in battle." Chapter 37. The Humiliation of Duryodhana. News of the austere life led by the Pandavas had reached King Dhritarashtra, and it grieved him to hear of his nephews and their wives' hardships. Despite his determination to see his own son, Duryodhana, ascend to the throne, the Pandavas remained family, being the sons of his brother Pandu. However, when Shakuni heard of the Pandavas' circumstances, his reaction was quite different. He manipulated Duryodhana into embarking on a sporting expedition into the forest, with the intention of camping near the Pandavas and flaunting their extravagant wealth and luxuries. Shakuni aimed to further break the spirit of the Pandavas, and Duryodhana readily embraced this idea. So, accompanied by his dear friend Kana, his many wives, his brothers, and his royal guard, including hundreds of fierce soldiers, Duryodhana set off into the forest. Upon learning of this trip, King Dhritarashtra, in his misguided belief that his son might be attempting to assist his distressed cousins, gave his blessings for the journey. As they journeyed, Duryodhana's group came upon a beautiful lake where he wished to swim with his wives and friends. However, the site was already occupied by soldiers from another kingdom. Duryodhana instructed his royal guard to clear the area so he could have the lake to himself. To their astonishment, the soldiers camped at the lake proved to be formidable adversaries, and when provoked, they retaliated violently. In the ensuing clash, Duryodhana's royal guard was soundly defeated. Even the valiant Karna was forced to retreat. Duryodhana and many of his entourage were taken captive, with only a few of his wives managing to escape and seek refuge in the Pandava camp. When Duryodhana's wives arrived at the Pandava camp, they implored Yudhishthira to help rescue their husband. Bhima scoffed at the idea. Why should we help our enemy? However, Yudhishthira, ever rational and stoic, recognized the importance of family. Duryodhana is our cousin and part of the Kuru dynasty. We cannot allow a family member to fall into enemy hands. Yudhishthira's decision surprised his brothers, but Draupadi, moved by the plea of the distraught woman, insisted that they rescue Duryodhana. The Pandavas gathered their weapons and set off on a mission to rescue their cousin. With the assistance of Duryodhana's wives, they located the enemy camp and executed a surprise attack, overpowering the warriors. As the leader of the enemy army revealed himself, Arjuna gasped in astonishment. Chapter 38. The Abduction of Draupadi. In stark contrast to Duryodhana's ill-fated royal guard, the Pandava brothers proved to be vastly superior in strength and skill. They swiftly overwhelmed the enemy warriors. To Arjuna's surprise, the leader of the enemy army was none other than Chitrasena, the Gandhava, who had once been his music and dance teacher in the heavenly realms of Lord Indra. Young prince, Chitrasena praised, you have once again displayed valor and skill. My army ranks among the very best in the realms, yet you and your 4 brothers have defeated us in open combat. What is your desire? Arjuna responded, the prince you have captured is our cousin Duryodhana, a member of the Kuru clan. As such, we are duty-bound to protect all our citizens. Release him and his companions immediately, and you may go on your way. As you wish, dear prince, Chitrasena complied, freeing Duryodhana and his companions. Although Duryodhana was relieved to be rescued, the humiliation of being saved by the Pandavas only fueled his anger. Meanwhile, in the Pandava camp, Draupadi received an unexpected visitor. Jayadra, the husband of Duryodhana's sister Dusashana, was on a journey through the forest and stopped by their dwelling to request some refreshments. When he saw Draupadi, he was overwhelmed by her beauty. Recognizing Jayadra as Dusashana's husband, Draupadi offered him refreshments. However, Jayadra, consumed by lust, began to speak seductively. Why is such a beautiful woman living in such squalor? Your husbands are mere beggars. Come back with me to my palace, and I will treat you as a queen should be. Scoundrel, replied Draupadi. How dare you speak to me in such a manner? You are married to Dusashana, who is like a sister to me. My husbands will be back soon, and they will make you pay for your insolence. But Jayadra's lust had overcome his judgment, and he was determined to claim Draupadi for himself, even by force. He seized her arm and dragged her towards his chariot. Draupadi screamed for help, attracting the attention of a nearby Brahmin, who rushed to intervene. Meanwhile, the Pandava brothers had returned just in time to hear Draupadi's cries for help. In hot pursuit, the Pandavas chased after Jayadra, whose chariot was fast but unfamiliar with the forest terrain. They intercepted him further along the path, where Nakula rescued Draupadi, Arjuna destroyed the chariot with his mighty arrows, and Bhima violently pulled Jayadratha from the wreckage. Jayadratha cowered in terror as he found himself surrounded by 5 powerful warriors and 1 furious queen. Chapter 39. The Final Years of Exile. Jayadratha begged for mercy from the Pandavas and Draupadi. Yudhishthira, ever the benevolent king, mediated with Bhima and Draupadi, pleading for leniency for Dushala's husband. Jayadratha's life was spared, but not without consequence. Arjuna handed Bhima a blade from his quiver, and with it Bhima shaved off Jayadratha's hair, leaving 5 distinct tufts as a mark of his humiliation. Jayadratha departed with his life, but in his heart he carried a profound shame and a smouldering resentment. He retreated to the banks of the river Ganga, where he embarked on a journey of rigorous penance, seeking the means for his redemption from Lord Shiva. After an exceptional time in deep meditation, Lord Shiva, moved by Jayadratha's penance, appeared before him. "What boon do you seek from me, Jayadratha?" asked Lord Shiva. "I desire the power to defeat the Pandavas in battle," replied Jayadratha. Lord Shiva considered the request and responded, "That is an impossible feat, for even the celestial beings have failed to conquer Arjuna in combat. However, in recognition of your dedicated penance, I grant you the ability to halt the advance of the other 4 Pandavas for a single day." With these words, Lord Shiva disappeared, leaving Jayadratha to return to his kingdom. Meanwhile, in Hastinapur, Duryodhana still grappled with the shame of being rescued by the Pandavas. His loyal friend Karna offered solace and vowed to personally kill the Prince Arjuna in battle. As part of his solemn oath, Karna pledged never to refuse a request from a Brahmin. During the final years of the Pandavas' exile, Duryodhana made more attempts to undermine their spirit. He guided a powerful sage and his group of more than 30 Brahmins to the Pandavas' dwelling. Duryodhana's plan was for the sage to request food for himself and his troop. And if the Pandavas were unable to provide, Duryodhana knew the sage would curse them, thereby further weakening his enemies. Duryodhana was unaware of the divine pot that provided the Pandavas with an endless supply of food, a gift from Lord Surya. But to his good fortune, on the day the sage and his group arrived at the Pandavas, Draupadi had already completed her meal. As per Lord Surya's condition, the pot would provide an abundance of food for the day until Draupadi had eaten her meal. Only then would the pot remain empty until the following day. Panicked, Draupadi rushed inside and fervently prayed to Lord Krishna for guidance. Appearing before her, Lord Krishna asked for the pot. Upon inspecting the pot's contents, he found a single grain of rice, which he consumed with a satisfied smile. Outside the dwelling, the sage and his troop experienced an unexpected sensation. Their stomachs became impossibly full. Embarrassed by their inability to partake of any food Draupadi would offer, they hastily departed. Chapter 40. Yudhishthira's Test. In their last year in the forest, before they would need to go into a year of hiding, the Pandavas encountered a desperate Brahmin. A deer had entangled the Brahmin's prayer tools in his antlers and fled into the forest. The Brahmin implored the brothers to help him retrieve his implements. Yudhishthira, along with Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadev, embarked on a mission into the dense woods. While searching for the deer, they became exceedingly thirsty. Sahadev, perched in a tree, spotted a distant lake. Nakula set off to fetch water, leaving the others to continue the search. When Nakula didn't return after considerable time, Sahadev ventured out to find him. One by one, the brothers headed towards the lake, but none returned until only Yudhishthira remained. When Yudhishthira arrived at the lakeside, a heart-wrenching sight awaited him. His 4 brothers lay lifeless, their bodies unmarked, seemingly taken by mystical means. Heartbroken and overwhelmed by thirst, Yudhishthir knelt by the water, ready to drink, when a mysterious voice intervened. "Stop! This lake is mine. If you wish to drink its water, you must first answer my questions." Before him, a yaksha, a supernatural being, materialized in the water. Yudhishthir responded, "I understand. Please ask your questions, and I will do my best to answer them." "Who or what is man's greatest ally?" the yaksha questioned. "Patience," replied Yudhishthir. "What is more fickle than the wind?" "The mind." "What is man's greatest enemy?" "Anger," replied Yudhishthir. "Losing what makes one rich?" "Greed." "What is the greatest wonder of the living?" "The living frequently see people dying, and find no one who has survived death, yet refuse to accept their own mortality." Impressed by Yudhishthir's responses, the yaksha said, "As a reward, I will revive one of your brothers. Tell me which one I should bring back to life." "We 5 brothers are sons of Kunti and Madri. Out of Kunti's 3 sons, I happen to be alive, but Mother Madri's 2 sons, Nakula and Sahadev, lie dead. I request you to revive one of them, so that each of my mothers have a son remaining." The yaksha praised Yudhishthir, saying, "You are indeed a virtuous king. You could have chosen the mighty beam who vowed to break the thigh of Duryodhan, or Arjuna, the greatest warrior in all of the celestial realms, but you chose in accordance with Dharma." In response to Yudhishthir's choice, the yaksha restored all of his brothers to life. As the yaksha's form dissolved, it revealed Lord Yama, the god of justice, who declared, "You are my spiritual son, Yudhishthir, and I bestow upon you and your family the gift of remaining concealed during your final year of exile, where you must live in hiding within a city." Chapter 41. The Year in Hiding. Yudhishthir's spiritual father, Lord Dharma, advised the Pandavas to spend their final year of exile in the city of Viratanaga. Before they returned to the forest, Lord Dharma returned the priest's implements. He had taken them in the form of a deer, as part of his test for Yudhishthir. Grateful, the Pandavas returned to their forest homes and discussed the incident with Draupadi. They were nearing the end of their 12 years in forest exile, with the 13th year requiring them to hide within the city. Discovery by Duryodhan and his spies during this year would result in another 12 years of exile. They carefully planned their disguises for the final year. Yudhishthir would offer his services as an advisor to King Virat and teach him the game of dice. Bhim would become the royal cook, ensuring access to all the food and drink he desired. He would also entertain the king as a wrestler. Arjuna, who would have to endure the curse of Urvasi for the final year, would disguise herself as Brihanala, a music and dance teacher, to train the king's daughter, Uttara. Arjuna's prior training with Chitrasena in Lord Indra's kingdom would now prove invaluable. Nakula would offer his services as a stableman for the king's horses. Sahadeva would manage the king's cattle. Finally, Draupadi would offer her services as a handmaiden to Queen Sudeshana. With their roles established, the Pandavas set off for the kingdom of Viratanaga, hiding their weapons along the way, high in the branches of a tree near the city. They successfully secured their positions and spent months of their final year in relative tranquility. However, one day, Draupadi, in the services of Queen Sudeshana, found herself the unwelcome target of the queen's brother. Kichaka had spotted Draupadi in the guise of Surandri while visiting his sister. He found himself overcome with desire. He made advances towards Surandri, but found himself rebuked. "I am a married woman. I am of the Gandhava tribe, and my Gandhava men are everywhere watching over and protecting me. It would be best to forget me, dear Kichaka." But the queen's brother was a powerful and ambitious man within Virat's kingdom, and he wasn't about to give up that easily. Chapter 42. Kichaka. Virat was an elderly and weak king. The defense and running of his kingdom fell mainly on the queen's brother, Kichaka, and as a result, Kichaka was one of the most powerful men in the kingdom of Viratanagar. Kichaka found himself infatuated with his sister's handmaiden, Draupadi, in the disguise of Sarandri. He informed his sister of his feelings. "I cannot force Sarandri to any actions that are not of her own accord. I will send her to fetch some wine from your palace chambers. Then you may attempt your seduction, and perhaps, in a private setting, she would be more receptive to your advances," said the queen. Reluctantly and nervously, Draupadi set off for Kichaka's palace chambers on the queen's instruction. Kichaka welcomed her into his chambers and began his seduction, promising Draupadi the position of head wife amongst his other wives. Once more, Draupadi rejected his advances, but Kichaka became more and more forceful in his approach. Draupadi shoved Kichaka off her. Kichaka lost his balance and fell over. Draupadi took the opportunity to run towards the court for protection. In the court, King Virat was engaged in meetings with his ministers and courtiers. Draupadi ran into the court with Kichaka close behind. Kichaka grabbed Draupadi, slammed her to the floor, and assaulted her. Virat was overwhelmingly dependent on Kichaka for his kingdom's protection, and as a result, he said nothing. Once more, Draupadi found herself humiliated and defenseless. That night, she went to Bhim's quarters and informed him of Kichaka's actions. Bhim was enraged and wanted to go to Kichaka immediately to kill him. But Draupadi had learned to be cautious in her actions. They were close to the end of the year in hiding. She did not want to recklessly endanger their identities, now that they were so close to the end. But retribution was required. She knew that Kichaka would not give up his pursuit of her, and together with Bhim, they came up with a plan for revenge. Chapter 43. Draupadi's Vengeance. Kichaka, the brother of the queen and the esteemed defender of Viratanagar, wielded considerable power and prestige. Accustomed to having his desires fulfilled, following rejection by her, Kichaka subjected Draupadi to assault and humiliation in the royal court. Draupadi was in her disguise as Sarandri, the handmaiden. The king and his advisors remained silent, wary of offending their kingdom's army general. Draupadi, together with Bhim, plotted their retribution. As Draupadi expected, Kichaka still relentlessly pursued her. After some initial light rejections, she finally seemed to give in to Kichaka's lustful suggestions. "Meet me in the dance hall at midnight, mighty general, and you may have your way with me. I dare not come to your quarters, or you to mine. Watchful eyes are everywhere, and I will not have aspersions cast on my character." Kichaka gleefully agreed to the arrangement. After an evening of drinking with his friends, Kichaka, mindful of the time, stumbled his way to the dance hall. He spotted a beautiful figure in the darkened hall, and his heart raced with excitement. But then a powerful figure stepped out of the shadows, and Kichaka's blood ran cold. Kichaka recognized the figure as the royal cook, the disguise that the mighty Bhim had taken on for his final year of hiding. Kichaka was confused, but had to quickly defend himself as Bhim launched his attack. Even in his drunken state, Kichaka was still an extremely skilled and powerful warrior. He tussled and wrestled with Bhim, putting up a valiant effort to kill his enemy, but there were few, if any, warriors who could match Bhim in strength and ferocity. Kichaka fell, and Bhim ended the life of his beloved Draupadi's tormentor. When Kichaka's lifeless body was found by servants the next day, the palace went into a state of disarray. The king and his army were in a state of shock, bewildered as to who could have done this to their mighty general.
The queen, in deep grief, suspected that her handmaiden, Sarandri, may have something to do with the death of her brother. The queen was aware of her brother's pursuit of Sarandri, and her humiliation at his hands. Was this the actions of your Gandhava men, as revenge for my brother's assault on you? Asked the queen. Perhaps it was, dear queen. I warned your brother many times to leave me be, for his own safety, but he paid no attention. You should leave. I terminate your services, said the queen. As you wish, your majesty. But I ask respectfully that you allow me 13 days to find other employment, said Sarandri. The queen was fearful for her own life if she offended the handmaiden, and so she reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, the news of Kichaka's demise spread to other kingdoms, and now that the mighty defender of Viratanagar was gone, their enemies made ambitious plans. Chapter 44. Assault on Viratanagar. The Pandavas had made Viratanagar their home for their final year of exile, the year of hiding. With the death of the kingdom's general Kichaka, the neighboring territories sought to exploit a rare opportunity. King Sushama, the ruler of the Trigarta kingdom, traveled to Hastinapur to meet with Duryodhan. He proposed an attack on Viratanagar and a splitting of the lands gained. Kichaka had defeated Sushama in battle many times previously and had taken up much of his kingdom. Now he had an opportunity for retribution. Duryodhan readily agreed. With the combined forces of Hastinapur and Trigarta attacking Viratanagar from the north and the south, it should be an easy victory. They made their battle plans and dispatched their armies to strategic positions to begin their attack. King Virat was shaken by the news of their impending doom. However, Yudhishthir, in his disguise as the court advisor, Kanka, steadied the king. Yudhishthir, trained since a child by the weapons master Drona and master of strategy, grand uncle Bhishma, was well versed in the art of war. He helped the king prepare the army and plan their defense of the kingdom. Yudhishthir recruited his brothers Bhim, Sahadev, and Nakul in their respective disguises to assist with leading the battalions in defense of the kingdom. Duryodhan and Sushama began the attack and were startled when their armies met fierce resistance. Meanwhile, citizens arrived at the Viratanagar palace seeking refuge. One of the invading armies, led by Kana, had captured their livestock and land, and they were desperate for assistance. Only the king's son, Uttar, was available to help the farmers recover their possessions. But the young prince was nervous. He had never fought an army as fierce as this one before. Arjuna, in disguise as the eunuch Brihanala, comforted the young man. Prince Uttar, I was once the charioteer for the mighty Arjuna. I will assist you to fight off the invading army. The prince felt braver, being in the presence of one who knew the legendary warrior Arjuna. The prince armed himself, and with Brihanala as his charioteer, they made off in the direction of the offending army. However, Brihanala advised the prince of a detour they would have to make. The tree where the mighty Pandavas hid their celestial weapons. Chapter 45. The Pandavas revealed. The siege of Viratanagar went on for days. The armies of Hastinapur and Trigarta were dumbfounded as to how their armies were fended off. With General Kichaka recently slain, they assumed an easy victory. However, they now found themselves on the verge of retreat. The major points of attack were on the north and the south. However, on the east, Kana moved his armies in to claim land and cattle. Kana found his path blocked by a single war chariot. In the carriage stood a young prince, armed with bow and arrow. The charioteer appeared to be a woman. The prince was nervous. He launched an arrow, but it fell hopelessly short of the mark. Kana and his army burst out laughing. If this was all Virat's army had to stop them, they had an easy path to their spoils of war.
But then the female charioteer revealed a bow and arrow and launched her attack. Karna found his army quickly decimated and had to defend himself from the onslaught. Meanwhile, Duryodhan, who had his army attacking from the north, also found his troops beaten back. A large warrior with a gigantic mace smashed his way through the soldiers, sending them flying high into the air. A glimmer of recognition dawned on Duryodhan's face. "It is Bhim. We have found the Pandavas. They will have to enter another 12 years of exile," laughed Duryodhan. But a sobering voice dashed his hopes. The weapons master Drona spoke out. "That is not so, my prince. With the dawn of the new day, the Pandavas' final year of exile has come to an end." Duryodhan's spies had failed to find the Pandavas during the year, and he had lost track of the final days due to his immersion in the invasion of Ratanagar. During his battle, Karna also recognized the fighting style of the Prince Arjuna. With Urvasi's curse now lifted, Arjuna had regained his manhood and had no further need for the disguise of Priyanala. He unleashed a ferocious attack on Karna and his army. The troops of Hastinapur and Tragata were forced to retreat. King Virat was overjoyed to learn his benefactors were the mighty Pandavas. He sought to form an alliance with the family and offered his daughter's hand in marriage to Arjuna. "I cannot accept," replied Arjuna. "Princess Uttara was my dance student and thus like a daughter to me. However, I propose her marriage to my son Abhimanyu." King Virat accepted the proposal and preparations were made for the wedding celebrations. But in Hastinapur, a dark mood prevailed as Duryodhan plotted his next move. Chapter 46 Prelude to War, Part 1. The Pandavas successfully fulfilled the conditions of their 13-year exile. By rights, their kingdom should not be returned to them. But Duryodhan, still consumed by anger, jealousy, and lust for power, was not willing to compromise on any negotiations. In the kingdom of Virat, Lord Krishna met with many senior kings and advisors, including Draupadi's father, King Draupadi. They discussed the Pandavas' best part of action. A peaceful resolution was preferred, but, if necessary, preparations for war were made. An emissary was sent to Hastinapur to set out the requests of the Pandava brothers. The kingdom of Indraprastha should have been returned to the brothers, but Yudhishthir was willing to settle for just 5 villages, 1 for each of the brothers. Despite the pleading of grandfather Bhishma, King Dhritarashtra, and even his mother Queen Gandhari to accept the offer, Duryodhan stubbornly refused. "I would not see them, even the land that would fit on the point of a needle," declared Duryodhan. Lord Krishna himself travelled to Hastinapur to negotiate a peaceful resolution. Duryodhan refused to listen to reason. In his mind, he was the rightful heir to the entire kingdom, and he was cheated of his birthright. He reasoned that with Bhishma, Drona, and Karna loyal to the throne, he would be able to defeat even the mighty Pandavas in battle. Before leaving Hastinapur, Lord Krishna met with Mother Kunti. The mother of the Pandavas had not seen her beloved children for so many years, and she sent a message back to Yudhishthir with Lord Krishna. In her message, Mother Kunti advised Yudhishthir to fight for what is rightfully theirs, and to avenge the humiliation of Draupadi at the hands of the Kauravas. However, there was one warrior among the Kauravas that gave Mother Kunti cause for concern, and she made up her mind to go and speak to this warrior directly. When Karna had completed his morning prayer rituals, he was surprised to see Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas, waiting for him on the banks of the river. Mother Kunti revealed the truth to Karna of his origins, a secret that she had kept since her teenage years. Chapter 47 Prelude to War, Part 2. In her youth, Kunti received a divine mantra that allowed her to invoke any deity and be blessed with a child. In a moment of childish spontaneity, she invoked the sun god Surya, resulting in the birth of a baby boy. Filled with fear, Kunti sent the child adrift down the river in a basket, where he was discovered by a charioteer
who adopted the baby as his own. Kunti had recognized Karna when he challenged Arjuna at the Great Games. Now, to avert the death of her 5 sons in the war ahead, Kunti revealed herself as the maternal mother of Karna. "You are my eldest child. Join your brothers and negotiate peace with Duryodhana," pleaded Kunti. Karna calmly replied, "Mother Kunti, I cannot go against Duryodhana. He showed me kindness and generosity when no one else did. However, I make this promise to you. I will not kill your sons, Yudhishthir, Bhim, Sahadev, or Nakula. But Arjuna I have sworn to kill in battle, and therefore at the end of the war you will still have 5 sons remaining." Meanwhile, the Kauravas and the Pandavas were making their alliances in preparation for the impending war. Duryodhana set off for Dwarka to gain the allegiance of Lord Krishna. When Arjuna heard of this, he also hastily set off for Dwarka. Duryodhana reached Dwarka first. Lord Krishna was in deep sleep when Duryodhana arrived at his chambers. He took his seat at Lord Krishna's head. When Arjuna arrived, he took his seat at Lord Krishna's feet. When Krishna opened his eyes, he saw Arjuna first. Then, as he sat up, he saw Duryodhana by his head. "How may I help you?" Lord Krishna asked the princes. "I seek your allegiance in the war ahead. I know you are partial to both Arjuna and me. However, I arrived here first, and as such, my request should be granted ahead of Arjuna's," replied Duryodhana. "That may be so, Prince Duryodhana, but I saw Arjuna first, and scriptures advise that the youngest should be helped first," replied Lord Krishna. "I am indeed partial to both of you, and as such, I will offer this choice to Prince Arjuna. My Narayana army is the largest and most powerful in the world. You may choose my army for yourself, or you may choose me alone. But if you choose me, be advised that I will not fight or raise any weapons myself in the war. I will serve only as friend and guide." Arjuna, without hesitation, chose Lord Krishna. Duryodhana could barely contain his glee, as he now added the most powerful army of all to his own forces.
Chapter 48 Prelude to War, Part 3. Lord Indra was the spiritual father of Arjuna, and as such, he chose to assist his son as much as possible in the impending war. Karna would pose the greatest threat to Arjuna in the war, with a level of archery skill possibly exceeding Arjuna's. But what gave Karna a greater edge was the impenetrable armor that was gifted to him since his birth. Karna had pledged to give anything he could to any Brahmin requesting it, as part of his vow to slay Arjuna in battle. Lord Indra took the form of a Brahmin and approached Karna one morning and requested of him the golden armor that covered his chest. However, Lord Surya, the sun god, the spiritual father of Karna, had appeared to Karna in his dream the night before. He warned Karna of Indra's plan. Recognizing Indra, Karna agreed to the Brahman's request, but in return he asked for the Vasavi Shakti, a celestial missile which could only be used once, but was capable of killing any mortal or immortal. Indra agreed, and also healed Karna's wounds after he had cut off the armor. Among the Kauravas, the final arrangements for the war were made. Grandfather Bhishma was made the supreme commander, but his condition for accepting the position was that he would himself not kill any of the Pandava brothers, and that Karna would not fight for as long as he held the position. Bhishma and Karna had a long history of animosity. Karna instead served as the bodyguard for Duryodhana. The army was divided into battalions, with each having their own commander. Among the Pandavas, Drishtadyumna was made the supreme commander. Drishtadyumna was the son of King Draupadi and the twin brother of the Pandavas' wife, Draupadi. He was a gift from the gods to King Draupadi, expressly created to kill Draupadi's enemy, the arms master, Drona. The rules of the war were established, which included: fighting must begin no earlier than sunrise, and should end by sunset. Multiple warriors must not attack a single warrior. No warrior may kill or injure a warrior who is surrendered. No warrior may kill or injure an unarmed warrior. No warrior may kill or injure an unconscious warrior. No warrior may kill or injure a warrior whose back is turned away. The battlefield selected was Kurukshetra. The armies made their way there and took up their positions. But as the war was about to begin, Arjuna begins to break down in despair, and Yudhishthir makes a most unusual decision. Chapter 49. War. Day 1 of the 18-day war. As the war was about to begin, and the armies assembled on either side, Arjuna felt a growing uneasiness. He asked Lord Krishna, who had volunteered to be his charioteer, to take him to a position where he could observe both armies. As Arjuna looked at the opposing side, and his eyes fell on his many friends and family, including his beloved grandfather Bhishma and his revered teacher Drona, Arjuna fell into deep despair. He dropped his weapons and declared, "I will not fight. What value is this poor earth if it means my hands would be stained with the blood of these valiant warriors?" Arjuna slumped back into his seat and looked to Lord Krishna for guidance. It is at this point that Arjuna, humbling himself as the student, Lord Krishna reveals his true form as the ultimate teacher. Time stops, as Arjuna is shown the workings of the universe and the nature of individual man. Many miles away in Hastinapur, the blind king Dhritarashtra asks his counselor Sanjaya to inform him on the proceedings of the war. Sanjaya, gifted with divine sight, becomes privy to the conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, and relays the wondrous message, sights and sounds conveyed by Lord Krishna. This message in time becomes known as the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God. Once Lord Krishna had finished his discourse, Arjuna is once again revitalized and certain in his duty to restore the balance of justice over injustice. But then his older brother Yudhishthir performs a surprising act. Yudhishthir removes his battle armor and walks towards the Kuru army with his palms folded. "What is he doing, Krishna?" Arjuna asks. Lord Krishna smiled. The Kuru army is confused and separate to allow Yudhishthir to pass. Yudhishthir approaches grandfather Bhishma first and asks for his blessings. Grandfather Bhishma laughs. "Indeed, Yudhishthir, you have no equal in your knowledge of the scriptures. I would have cursed you to fail in this war if you had not performed the act of obtaining blessings from your elders first. In return, I grant you this boon. Know that I am nigh invincible, and that I can only die at the time and place of my choosing. However, you may approach me at a later stage to obtain knowledge of how you may yet defeat me." Yudhishthir thanks Bhishma, and then obtains blessings from his teacher Drona. Drona advises Yudhishthir that while he holds weapons in hand, he is undefeatable in battle. Yudhishthir then takes his blessings from his teacher Kripa and his uncle Shalya. Before he returns to his army, Yudhishthir calls out, "If there are any among the sons of Dhritarashtra who wish to switch sides, you may do so now. This way, at the end of the war, the king will have at least one son remaining who can perform his last rites." One voice heeded the call, Yuyutsu, the son of Dhritarashtra and the half-brother of Duryodhana. Yudhishthir embraced him, and they returned to their side for day 1 of the war to commence. Chapter 50. War. The first 4 days. The first day of the war did not go well for the Pandavas. The 2 sons of King Virat, Uttara and Shweta, were slain by the afternoon of the first day. Arjuna was shaken. Despite his great skill, they were faced with an overwhelmingly larger army, led by numerous formidable warriors. Foremost among them was Bhishma, their own grandfather, whose prowess on the battlefield was unmatched. Each day, he decimated legions of the Pandava forces with relentless ferocity. By day 2, the Pandavas began making more headway.
Among the fiercest of the Pandava army was the young Abhimanyu, the valiant son of Arjuna and Subhadra, Lord Krishna's younger sister. Oftentimes he engaged in battle with grandfather Bhishma himself. Meanwhile, Bhim carved through scores of the Kuru army, smashing away thousands of enemies with his deadly mace. Drishtadyumna engaged with Drona in battle on many occasions, with no sure winner. While Arjuna at times was so magnificent in battle that armies on both sides stopped to witness the spectacle. To make matters worse for the Kuru army, Bhim had summoned his son Gatagacha, a half-human, half-demon hybrid. Gatagacha, with his shape-shifting abilities, wreaked havoc on Duryodhana's army. While Duryodhana had been pleased with the first day of the war, by the end of the third day he was distraught. Bhim's relentless assaults forced him to retreat on many occasions. He turned his frustrations on grandfather Bhishma. "You have been too soft with the Pandava brothers. Your affection for Arjuna has allowed him to destroy vast battalions of our army with no answer. I would rather have chosen Karna as supreme commander." Grandfather Bhishma was greatly insulted and loudly declared, "Tomorrow I swear to kill Arjuna in battle or force Lord Krishna to break his vow and take up arms." The following day, Bhishma unleashed his full fury upon the battlefield, raining death upon thousands of Pandava soldiers. Arrows flew like torrents, targeting both Arjuna and Lord Krishna. Arjuna could not bring himself to fight with full force against Bhishma, the man who he looked up to as a father. Knowing that if he did not intervene, the Prince Arjuna would lose his life that day, Lord Krishna stepped down from the chariot and picked up a displaced chariot wheel. Raising it into the air, Lord Krishna charged at Bhishma. Having fulfilled his vow of forcing Lord Krishna to take up arms, Bhishma laid down his weapons. Death at the hands of Lord Krishna would grant him instant access into the heavens. Arjuna, ashamed at his inability to fight Bhishma, had forced Lord Krishna to break his vow, grabbed onto Lord Krishna's leg and begged him to put down the wheel. Lord Krishna relented as Arjuna recommitted himself to fight without restraint.
Chapter 51. War. Days 5 to 10. The fall of Bhishma. In the first 8 days of the war, the likelihood of victory swung from side to side. Bhim slew many of Duryodhana's brothers, and on many occasions came close to killing Duryodhana himself. The armies utilized many battle formations, each trying to outmaneuver the other. The loss of lives was devastating on both sides, but the rules of the war set out at the beginning were still followed. The most destructive force on the Kuru army remained grandfather Bhishma. On the 9th day, the Pandavas were on the verge of retreat when the sun finally set and signaled the end of fighting for the day. During the night, in consultation with Lord Krishna, Yudhishthir decided to approach grandfather Bhishma. Bhishma welcomed the Pandavas and Lord Krishna into his quarters. "How may I help you, children?" "Grandfather," Yudhishthir replied, "at the beginning of the war, you asked us to approach you at a later stage, to inquire as to how we may defeat you. If the war continues with you opposing us, we will have no more army left to fight. The time for us to know is now." "I see," replied Bhishma. "There is one way you may defeat me. Know that I will not attack or fight a woman, or one who has been a woman before. When I was younger, I abducted 3 princesses to be the brides of the Hastinapur king. But one of the princesses was already in love with another, and as such, she could not be married to the king. She was sent back to her kingdom. On her return, however, she was rejected by both the embarrassed lover, who I defeated in battle, and her own family. She returned to Hastinapur and demanded that I marry her instead. However, my oath prevented me from doing so. She took her own life, after first vowing that she will return in a subsequent life to bring about my downfall. On your army fights the son of King Draupadi, the valiant Shikhandi, who has slain many of our Kuru warriors. Know that Prince Shikhandi was the Princess Amba in his previous life. Armed with this knowledge, the Pandavas returned to their camp. The next day, Arjuna rode out to battle with Shikhandi in his chariot. With Shikhandi as his shield, Bhishma would not attack him, and Arjuna released the full fury of his attack. Dozens of arrows drove through Bhishma's armor, and the mighty warrior finally fell. The arrows that drove through his body acted as a bed when Bhishma fell to the ground. The battle was halted as warriors on both sides stopped to pay their respects. Arjuna and Lord Krishna approached, and Bhishma asked Arjuna to provide him with a pillow fit for a warrior. Arjuna shot 3 arrows into the ground, and the tops of the arrows provided support to Bhishma's head. Arjuna shot another arrow into the ground, and a fountain of water erupted to quench Bhishma's thirst. Through the night, Bhishma counseled family members on both sides of the army, and at the most auspicious time, he chose his departure from his body. Chapter 52. War. Days 11 to 13. The Trap. With the fall of Bhishma, the role of Supreme Commander went to Drona, the Master Arms Teacher. In addition, Kana now actively joined the war, leading battalions of his own. The forces of the Pandavas and the Kauravas were now evenly matched, with the tide of advantage ebbing and flowing. Duryodhana commanded Drona to capture Yudhishthir and bring the war to an end, but the Pandava forces protected their king well and counterattacked to attempt to capture Duryodhana. Drona used this to his advantage and assembled his forces in a concentric ring, with Duryodhana in the middle in a plan to lure the Pandava forces into a trap and slay their most valiant warriors. Drona knew that Arjuna would be the one warrior who could penetrate the formation, and as such, lured him away to the eastern part of the battlefield earlier in the day. The one warrior remaining with Yudhishthir who had the knowledge to enter the formation was the teenage son of Arjuna, Abhimanyu. Abhimanyu had the knowledge to enter the formation, but not how to exit it. The Pandavas came up with a plan for the young warrior to lead the charge into the formation, with the rest of the battalion following him. Then, together, they would be able to break out of the formation with Duryodhana as their captive. Abhimanyu's charioteer expressed concern. There was much responsibility placed on the young warrior. Abhimanyu eased his worries. "Do not fear. I am the son of Arjuna, the greatest warrior who ever lived. I am the nephew of Lord Krishna. Today, the war will come to an end." Abhimanyu charged into the formation with his uncles Bhim, Sahadev, Nakula, and Yudhishthir following close behind. Abhimanyu left a trail of devastation as he effortlessly cut through the Kaurava warriors, striking terror into the heart of Duryodhana himself. Among the warriors defending the formation was Jayadratha, the king who had attempted to kidnap Draupadi while the Pandavas were exiled in the forest. He was captured and humiliated by the brothers, and he thereafter went on a severe penance to obtain from Lord Shiva the means for his redemption. Lord Shiva granted Jayadratha the ability to stop the advance of the Pandava forces, excluding Arjuna, for a single day. Jayadratha invoked the boon, and to the surprise of the Pandava brothers, fought all of them and their allies to a standstill, keeping them out of the battle formation. This meant that the young Abhimanyu was trapped in the formation, alone. Chapter 53. War. Days 13 to 14. The fall of Abhimanyu. Abhimanyu continued to cut his way into Drona's battle formation, striking terror into the hearts of even the most veteran of warriors. Eventually, Duryodhana's son dared to challenge the young prince, but Lakshmana was no match for Abhimanyu. the son of Arjuna cut him down with a single arrow. Duryodhana, mad with grief and anger, screamed at his supreme commander, "Kill him now, by any means necessary." Until then, Drona had adhered to the agreed upon rules of engagement. However, unchecked, Abhimanyu would now bring an end to all of them. He consulted with Karna to destroy Abhimanyu's bow and slay his steed and charioteer. Karna did as commanded. Then, all the veteran warriors, which included Drona, Karna, Kripa, Kritavama, Shakuni, and Ashvatthama, the son of Drona, attacked the unarmed warrior. Weaponless, Abhimanyu picked up the wheel of his broken chariot and continued his assault on the Kaurava warriors, slaying many. But as the numerous arrows pierced his armor, the young warrior slowed, and a mace blow to the back of his head brought an end to the prince's 16 years of life. On the 13th day of war, Abhimanyu fell, and with him all Dharma that had remained. Many miles away, the Princess Uttara wept, as she cradled the unborn son of Abhimanyu within her womb. When Arjuna heard the news, he was overcome with grief. Then his grief turned to rage. Arjuna blamed his son's death on Jayadratha, who kept his brothers out of the battle formation, thus trapping his son alone. Arjuna swore to either slay Jayadratha the next day before sunset, or take his own life by fire. When the news of Arjuna's terrible oath reached Jayadratha, he was terrified and wanted to flee the battlefield. But Duryodhana, Drona, and Shakuni saw this as their opportunity to bring an end to the deadliest warrior among the Pandavas. On the dawn of the 14th day, Arjuna began his furious attack on the Kaurava army, targeting Jayadratha specifically. But Drona assembled his armies in a manner that shielded the terrified king. As the day drew to a close, Arjuna seemed no closer to fulfilling his vow to slay Jayadratha, and the Kaurava army grew in confidence. Lord Krishna looked to the sky, and the moon moved to eclipse the sun. With the battlefield in darkness, Jayadratha believed that the sun had set, signaling the end of the day's battle. He excitedly came forward to witness Arjuna's self-immolation. As he came out of hiding, the moon moved to reveal the sun once more. Arjuna released his arrow, and Jayadratha, the brother-in-law of Duryodhana, was no more. Chapter 54. War. The 14th Night. Gatagacha. With the dishonorable slaying of Abhimanyu, the rules of engagement established at the beginning of the war fell away. The battle continued into the night. Gatagacha, the half-demon son of Bhima, was at his most powerful in darkness, and he unleashed devastation on the Kaurava army. Drona, enraged that the Pandavas had managed to slay Jayadratha while he was under his protection, fought the Pandava army with a vengeful fury. Meanwhile, Arjuna prepared himself to take on Karna. On several occasions, his older brother Yudhishthira had chided him on his inability to bring about an end to his rival archer. Arjuna had boasted of being the superior warrior, but Karna still stood. The prince was ready to make his final stand against his nemesis. However, Lord Krishna cautioned him. Karna possesses the Vasavi Shakti gifted to him by Lord Indra. Even you would not be able to stop this weapon. Gatagacha possesses both divine and demonic weapons. Let him engage with Karna first and weaken him. Arjuna reluctantly agreed to Krishna's counsel. Ashvatthama, the son of Drona, was able to hold off Gatagacha despite the half-demon's great power, as did Karna several times. But as the night progressed, Gatagacha's power progressively increased. His power of illusion struck terror into the Kaurava army, causing many to flee the battlefield. Duryodhana was desperate. He turned to Karna. "My friend, we cannot go on like this. End the demon now.
use whatever means possible. Karna had kept Lord Indra's weapon in reserve, especially for Arjuna. He now removed it from his quiver, spoke the mantra to charge the weapon, and launched it at the demon. Gatagacha had grown to a gigantic size, and he leapt into the air to escape the attack. But Karna's aim was inescapable, and Gatagacha was killed by the Vasavi Shakti. However, as he fell, he destroyed an entire battalion of the Kaurava army. Arjuna, watching from a distance, was horrified at the death of his nephew. Lord Krishna, however, simply smiled. Although Gatagacha had proved a valuable ally in the war, his demonic nature had caused many problems in the realms. If Gatagacha had not perished, Lord Krishna himself would have brought about his end. Now, his death served a noble purpose. He had rid the enemy of the one weapon that might have killed the Prince Arjuna. Chapter 55. War. Day 15. The Fall of Drona. On the 15th day, the Supreme Commander of the Kaurava army continued his relentless assault on the Pandava army. Spurred on by Duryodhana's insults, Drona set aside all manner of honorable conduct as he pressed on to win the war for his king. He slaughtered hundreds of thousands of Pandava soldiers by the hour, but the old warrior still held back when facing the Pandava brothers, most especially Arjuna, his most favorite student. Arjuna too could not bring himself to fight with full force against his former teacher. There were times that Drona unleashed a furious attack on the warrior prince and watched with pride as Arjuna countered and neutralized the attack. As the day progressed, Drona ended the lives of King Virat, the father-in-law of Abhimanyu, and King Draupadi, the father of Drishtadyumna and Draupadi. Drishtadyumna was grief-stricken. He was created by Draupadi for the sole purpose of killing Drona, but his skills did not match up to the old warrior. At the beginning of the war, Guru Drona informed the Pandavas that he could not be defeated with weapons in hand. Now, the Pandava army was once more on the brink of annihilation. Lord Krishna shared a plan with the Pandava brothers. Guru Drona lives for his son Ashvatthama, as his son does for him. We must make him believe that his son has perished in battle. Only then will he lay down his weapons and enter meditation. This will then be your opportunity to put an end to the Kaurava Supreme Commander. Yudhishthir and Arjuna were uneasy with the plan, but Bhim readily agreed. Bhim killed an elephant named Ashvatthama, and during the battle shouted out to Drona, "Ashvatthama is dead!" Drona felt his arms go weak as he contemplated the death of his beloved son. But he would not believe Bhim. Ashvatthama was much too great a warrior to be easily slain. He brought his chariot closer to Yudhishthir, the just, the one who would not tell a lie. Drona shouted out his anguished question. "Answer me, Yudhishthir. Is Ashvatthama dead?" Yudhishthir, the one who could not tell a lie, shouted back, "Yes, Ashvatthama is dead." And under his breath, drowned out by the din of battle, he continued, "Ashvatthama, the elephant, that is." Drona, hearing only the first part, dropped his weapons and fell to his knees. He entered a deep meditation. Drishtadyumna, seizing the opportunity, jumped into Drona's chariot, and with a slash of his sword, removed the head of the old warrior, as Arjuna and other soldiers looked on in horror. Chapter 56. War. Days 16 to 17. Karna. On the 16th day, Karna was appointed as Supreme Commander of the Kaurava forces. Karna's life was one that was filled with tragedy and longing for greatness. Just before the war, Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas, revealed to him that she was also his maternal mother. As a desperate teenager with a newborn child, she had set him afloat down the Ganges River, where he was found and adopted by a charioteer and his wife. Unknown to the Pandava brothers, and even to his friend Duryodhana, Karna was the eldest brother of the Pandavas. Karna resumed the war with fury. He had promised Mother Kunti that he would not kill any of her sons aside from Arjuna. That way, she would still retain 5 sons at the end of the war. Karna kept to his word. There were times where he could have slain Yudhishthir, Bhim, Sahadev, and Nakul, but he spared their lives. Arjuna was his lifelong rival, the prince that was revered by all. Karna had long envied the adulation that the prince enjoyed, feeling in some way that it should have been his. During the day's battle, Bhim finally encountered Dusashan, the brother of Duryodhana. During the insidious game of dice, Yudhishthir had lost their wife, Draupadi, in a gambling fever. Dusashan had gone to Draupadi's chambers, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her down to the royal court. Bhim had sworn an oath to break open the chest of Dusashan, drink his blood, and collect the remainder to wash Draupadi's hair. On the 16th day of the war, Bhim fulfilled his grisly vow, to the horror of soldiers on both sides. On day 17, Karna felt uneasy. He was unaware of his royal heritage during his youth, but he always felt that he was destined for more than the humble life of a charioteer. He exhibited great fighting prowess as he grew, and he sought out the greatest arms teacher there was, the immortal Lord Parashurama, known as an avatar of Lord Vishnu himself. Lord Parashurama took an oath to never teach any of the Kshatriya, the warrior class. Karna deceived the teacher and presented himself as a Brahmin, a member of the priest class. Lord Parashuram agreed to train him, and Karna proved to be an exceptional student, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. One day, as part of his dakshina, teacher payment, Karna offered his thigh as a headrest for Lord Parashuram while the teacher slept. During Parashuram's slumber, an insect climbed Karna's leg and drilled into his thigh. The pain was excruciating, but Karna refused to move and disturb his teacher's sleep. When Lord Parashuram awoke, he saw the blood-soaked thigh of Karna. No Brahmin could endure the pain of this insect. You have lied to me. You are a Kshatriya. I have taught you all that I know in the art of war and archery, Karna. But this is my punishment to you. When you need these skills the most, you will forget all of them. Karna, the son of the sun, found himself in his final stand with his hated enemy Arjuna. They exchanged volleys of celestial missiles between them, each one countering the other, and they seemed to end in stalemate. But unfortunately for Karna, during the battle, his chariot wheel became lodged in a crevice. He jumped down to pry the wheel free, as Arjuna reloaded his Gandhava bow. At Lord Krishna's instruction, Arjuna released the arrow, and Karna, who previously had the skill to counter the attack, felt Lord Parashuram's curse take hold. He forgot all that he learnt. Arjuna's arrow struck, and he ended the life of his bitter rival, and unknowingly, the life of his eldest brother. Chapter 57. War. Day 18 of the 18-day war. Duryodhana was distraught at the death of his brother Dusashan and his dear friend Karna. The paternal uncle of the Pandavas, Shalya, was appointed as supreme commander for the Kauravas on the 18th day. He led the remnants of the army as best he could, but he was slain by Yudhishthir early in the day. The 98 remaining brothers of Duryodhana attacked Bhim in an attempt to avenge their brother's death, but they were no match for the mighty Pandava. He smashed through all of them with his deadly mace, leaving Duryodhana as the last living son of Queen Gandhari. As the day progressed,
Sahadev fulfilled the prophecy of Bhim at the game of dice and ended the life of Duryodhana's uncle. Shakuni, the cunning manipulator, whose actions were instrumental in the war they now fought, lay dead. Seeing all hopes of victory lying in tatters, Duryodhana grabbed his mace and desperately tried to find sanctuary. He hid at a nearby lake, but the Pandava soldiers eventually tracked him down. Yudhishthir arrived at the lake with his 4 brothers and Lord Krishna. "Reveal yourself, Duryodhana. Your army is gone, but I offer you one final chance of victory. If you can defeat any one of us in combat, you may retain your throne." Duryodhana emerged from the lake with his mace in hand. He chose Bhim, his childhood rival, as his opponent. Although Bhim had the greatest strength, during the Pandavas' exile, Duryodhana had trained many more years under Drona, Bhishma, and Lord Krishna's older brother, Balarama. He was the superior mace fighter. As the fight progressed, Bhim eventually began to tire. He caught sight of Lord Krishna during the battle and saw their guide tapping his thigh. Bhim was reminded of the oath he made when Duryodhana had lustfully tapped his thigh when he had won Draupadi in the game of dice. Bhim swung the mace low and broke Duryodhana's thigh. Duryodhana fell, and he lamented that the move was illegal in the rules of mace fighting. Bhim viciously kicked the head of Duryodhana. "Where was your sense of rules when you attempted to poison me as a child, attempted to kill my mother and my brothers in the house of wax, when you attempted to defile our wife in court, or when you killed my nephew Abhimanyu? No, Duryodhana, you now have what you deserve, a slow death with no one by your side." The Pandavas and Lord Krishna left the dying prince by the lake, but under the cover of night, 3 of Duryodhana's allies made their way to their fallen leader, and together made their final, treacherous plans. Chapter 58. War, Dark Night. Ashvatthama, the son of Drona, Kripacharya, and Kritavarma gathered around the dying Duryodhana. Ashvatthama whispered to Duryodhana, "We have seen the deceitful way in which Bhim brought you down, valiant leader. The Pandavas, in a similar manner, spread rumors about my death in order to slay my father. I will avenge you both." Duryodhana weakly smiled and commanded Kripacharya and Kritavarma to anoint Ashvatthama as the final supreme commander of the Kauravas. The trio returned to their camp, and Ashvatthama mulled over a way to overcome their enemy. As he stared into the distance, he spotted an owl. The owl descended into a tree and killed the birds resting in their nests. A sinister plan formed in his mind. The 3 warriors infiltrated the Pandava camp that very night, with the intention of slaying the Pandavas in their sleep. To their dismay, the brothers did not return to camp, but in their stead they found the Upa-Pandavas, the 5 sons of Draupadi. Ashvatthama killed them while they slept, and then crept into Drishtadyumna's quarters. And while the warriors slept, Ashvatthama slayed the brother of Draupadi as well. The trio moved through the camp and slaughtered the remaining forces of the Pandava army. In the still of the night, they then set the camp on fire. Ashvatthama returned to their fallen prince, Duryodhana, and delivered the details of their grisly deed. Duryodhana smiled and departed his mortal body. When the news reached the Pandava brothers, they were distraught. They sent for Draupadi and delivered the heart-wrenching message. Draupadi fainted, overwhelmed with grief. She had lost her father, brother, and all of her children in the conflict. With the revelation of Ashvatthama's involvement, Lord Krishna cautioned Arjuna, for Ashvatthama possessed knowledge of a weapon of immense power. The brothers found the son of Drona at sage Vyasa's ashram near the bank of the Ganges. Ashvatthama was surprised that he was so quickly discovered. He picked up a blade of grass and charged it with the divine mantra, and then released against the brothers a celestial missile, one of the most destructive and irresistible weapons known to the gods, the Brahmastra. Chapter 59. The End. As the Pandava brothers saw the Brahmastra hurtling towards them, Arjuna released a counter-weapon. This prompted the intervention of sage Vyasa and sage Narada. A collision between these two weapons would create 12 years of drought. Time stopped as the sages advised Arjuna and Ashvatthama to recall their weapons. Arjuna, who had the knowledge to do so, recalled his weapon. Ashvatthama, however, did not have the skill to recall his weapon. Instead, he redirected the celestial missile to find and kill any lineage of the Pandavas that remained. The Brahmastra redirected towards the womb of Princess Uttara, who carried the child of Prince Abhimanyu, the grandchild of Prince Arjuna. Sensing this redirection, Lord Krishna dissolved the weapon himself. Ashvatthama, having fulfilled his vengeance for his father Drona and leader Duryodhana, surrendered himself to the Pandavas. The brothers, on instruction from sage Vyasa, spared his life out of reverence for Drona, their childhood teacher. Ashvatthama was born with a gem on his forehead, which protected him from hunger, thirst, fatigue, old age, diseases, weapons, and deities. As punishment for his crimes, Lord Krishna ordered Ashvatthama to cut the gem from his forehead and cursed him to wander the forest alone and shunned by all until the end of the Kali Yuga. During this time, the wound on his forehead would not heal. The Pandavas and Lord Krishna returned to Hastinapur. The people were heartbroken. Many of their loved ones were slain in the war. Mother Kunti finally revealed the truth of Karna being the Pandavas' eldest brother. The brothers were grief-stricken, and they performed the final rites for the family members and friends who perished in the war. Queen Gandhari blamed Lord Krishna for the death of her 100 sons, and she cursed him that the Yadava clan would come to an end and that Lord Krishna himself would die like an ordinary mortal. Lord Krishna accepted the curse of the devoted mother Gandhari, the queen who had blindfolded herself since marriage, so that she would experience the world in the same way as her blind husband. Years later, conflict broke out between members of the Yadava clan, and the lineage came to an end. One morning, when Lord Krishna rested in the forest, a hunter mistook him for prey and shot an arrow that pierced his ankle. Fulfilling the curse of Gandhari, Lord Krishna departed the mortal plane. Epilogue. Yudhishthira ruled the kingdom for 36 years, and during the time of his rule, the lands experienced peace and prosperity. When the Pandavas heard the news of Lord Krishna's passing, they too decided to leave the mortal plane. The kingship was passed to Parikshit, the grandson of Arjuna. The Pandavas and Draupadi departed on foot for the pinnacle of Mount Meru, the path to the heavenly plain. As they departed the city, a stray dog accompanied them on their journey. The path was long and arduous. They continued up the steep mountain. Eventually, Draupadi, in exhaustion, fell to her death. Bhima, who followed behind Yudhishthira, yelled out, "Why did she fall, Yudhishthira?" And Yudhishthira, the wise, replied, "Draupadi loved all her husbands, but she loved Arjuna the most, and therefore she fell." The 5 brothers and the stray dog continued their journey. Next, Sahadev fell. "Why did he fall, Yudhishthira?" asked Bhima. He was very proud of his wisdom and felt there was no one equal to him in his wisdom, and so he fell. The next to fall was Nakul. "Why did he fall, Yudhishthira?" asked Bhima.
He was very proud of his beauty, and so he fell. Then Arjuna fell. And again Bhim asked Yudhishthir the just, why did he fall? He was very proud of his abilities as a warrior, and felt there was no one equal to him as a warrior. And so he fell, replied Yudhishthir. Finally, Bhim fell, and Yudhishthir muttered to himself, he was gluttonous, and didn't care for the hunger of others, and so he fell. At last, Yudhishthir reached the top of the mountains, and alongside him the stray dog that had followed him since the city many miles away. A celestial craft descended from the heavens, and Lord Indra stepped out. Congratulations, Yudhishthir. You are the first to have earned the honor of achieving the heavens while still in mortal form. As Yudhishthir stepped into the vehicle, the dog followed him. Stop, said Lord Indra. The dog cannot be allowed into the heavens. It must remain here. Yudhishthir stepped out of the chariot. This dog has walked the same path as I have, and endured all the same hardships that I did to get here. If it is not allowed to complete the journey to the heavens, then I will remain here as well. Lord Indra tried to convince Yudhishthir otherwise, but he remained steadfast in his decision. A bright light enveloped the dog, and in its place stood Lord Dharmaraj, the spiritual father of Yudhishthir. Congratulations, Yudhishthir. Once more you demonstrate your perfect virtues and sense of justice. I am pleased. Yudhishthir accompanied Lord Indra to the heavens, and was surprised when he arrived to see Duryodhan and the rest of the Kauravas. He looked around, and his brothers and Draupadi were nowhere to be seen. Where are my brothers and Draupadi? Asked Yudhishthir. Lord Indra asked Yudhishthir to follow him down a dark staircase, and they descended into hell. The smell of brimstone and the cry of tortured souls assaulted Yudhishthir's senses. He could hear his brothers and Draupadi crying out in pain. Why are my brothers and Draupadi here, and the Kauravas in heaven? Asked Yudhishthir. The Kauravas have paid for their sins on the battlefield. Your brothers and Draupadi must still suffer the pain of the sins they have committed, replied Lord Indra. Then I shall remain here until they have completed their penance, replied Yudhishthir. And Yudhishthir settled down into the scorching earth, engulfed in the stench of rotting flesh. After what seemed like an eternity, Lord Dharmaraj revealed himself once more, and the illusion of hell faded away. You have passed your final test, Yudhishthir. All kings must face the fire of hell to stay truthful. Yudhishthir joined his family in the heavens and gave up his mortal body. The broken tusk Lord Ganesha used as a writing instrument finally came to a stop as sage Vyasa finished his narration. Lord Ganesha's writing tool had failed during the transcription, and he had broken off one of his tusks to continue the capturing of sage Vyasa's tale. And so ended one of the greatest collaborations between God and man, the Mahabharata.
Thank you for watching so far. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're new here, please subscribe. This will ensure that more people can find this resource. Click the notification button so that you can be the first to know about new uploads. And please do comment below. I'll do my best to reply to any questions. Thank you.